Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link, or prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin, but always make sure your arguments are LPP.
What is up, everybody? Welcome. Oh, whoops.
Hang on. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another epic after show here on LPP. Everybody's heading on over from Standing for Truth because there was another good one in this debate series between Kent Hovind and all the challengers. Tonight it was Snake Was Right coming in for some fun, and it was an interesting one. Definitely. We got a bunch of people backstage. We'll be getting into the open discussion panel here very, very shortly. For those of you joining us for the first time, how this kind of works is for the first 45 minutes to an hour, we'll do a kind of round robin as in order of people come in. They'll get to take 45 seconds, maybe a minute, to air their thoughts about the best one-liners, best singers, best comebacks, overall thoughts about the debate, and just, like I said, their general thoughts. And then we'll go on to the next person. And then as we'll go into kind of like general conversation after everybody's on the panel initially gets done with their initial, thoughts about the debate. And then as new people come in, everybody will shut up for a second, let them talk, and then we'll go back to whatever dumpster fire is going on. Now, as you can see at the top right now, it's just Kent versus Snake after show and open mic. However, at some point in the evening, I am anticipating that I will have to do a slight modification, and we will have to showcase that we are in full scale dumpster fire. That may or may not happen, but usually within an hour and a half to 2 hours, it gets pretty crazy. So you'll want to stick around for some of that fun. All right, without further ado, let's bring people in. And, Jackson Rose backstage. Usually he's the first person to the panel. But tonight, he was defeated by the one and only Brett Keane, who is the first up in the panel. What's up, guys? What's up, Brett? How you doing? Welcome to the show. What are your thoughts about tonight's debate?
Are you asking me first?
Yeah, man, you're first. You were first backstage. You're first up to air your thoughts in the round robin.
The only thing about the usual thing I've seen in these discussions is Snake was a little bit more articulate, but he still got absolutely destroyed by Kent Hogan.
All right. Appreciate that. All right, up next, Jackson Rowe, then Donnie, then SOS. What's up? Go ahead, Jackson.
Hey, John, what's going on? I've been kind of down recently, so I haven't been in the debate circuit that much. I debated Kent Hogan the other day. I think I did decently. I mean, it's basically the same debate over and over, it seems like. We've had like 10 of the same debates. Yeah. But, what's been going on with me? I vape now as of 3 days ago.
So were you smoking beforehand, and now you're vaping, or are you just...
No, I decided to pick up a bad habit for no reason, basically.
Well,
It's pretty funny.
As he's cough, it reminds me of a kind. Go ahead.
Listen, if you're coughing from vape, yeah, buddy, that's So are you actually trying to tell us that you're vaping some weed wax over there? Is that what you're actually doing?
No, I'm on probation. I don't do that. It's just nicotine.
John, have you ever been a Seinfeld fan? There's an episode where George Costanza he needs an excuse to break up with his girlfriend. He's not happy with her, and somebody tells him, so and so hates smoking. If she finds out you're a smoker, then maybe she'll dump you and you'll be out of the terrible situation. So he's like, ooh, perfect. So he takes up smoking, but he's never smoked before. So just like Jackson Rowe, he takes one puff. He's coughing all over the. What's that, Jackson?
I was kind of dating this girl, sort of, and I got sick of her, and I didn't know how to dump her. So I basically just acted really weird around her and made her dump me. That's how it worked.
There you go. I guess it works. Yeah. I guess it works perfectly.
Well, Jackson, I guess you and George Costanza have things in common. Being extremely awkward with the ladies, but that's okay. Okay, so thank you, Jackson, for sharing about your latest bad habit adoption. Yeah. In regards to tonight's debate, do you have any feelings about what we all just observed?
Well, I watched a little bit of it, but I mean, it's just the same stuff over and over from both sides, really. I mean, it's getting kind of repetitive. I mean, that's all I really have to say.
ERVs are getting very repetitive on your side, Jackson. I agree.
I mean both sides. Both sides are doing it, really.
Your side's the one that keeps bringing up the ERV argument.
Hey, it's a good argument.
It's a lousy argument.
May I make a comment on this?
Okay, hang on. We're before we get into additional stuff. So Donnie, you're up. Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts about the debate? And then SOS will be up next, and then Otangelo, and then we can get back into the dumpster fire may start within like 15 minutes. So go ahead, Donnie. What are your thoughts about the debate? Then SOS, then Otangelo, and then we'll go back to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, 15 minutes till dumpster fire might be good because I do have a nice fresh sandwich here that I'm going to pig out on after I give my thoughts. Firstly, thought it was a great debate. Admittedly, I've been having a ton of fun with this evolution debate challenge. When we came up with it at the end of 2021, I knew we'd get a few debates, but wow, I mean, I think this was like debate 20 in it. And I appreciate people like Snake was right. who engage in these debates, make for a good debate. So I got nothing against Snake. Obviously, I totally disagree with some of the arguments he was using, like the ERV argument, which we will get into later in great detail, I am sure. But yeah, I'm happy with how this series has turned out. It's really brought out a lot of interesting dialogue and debate within the greater community, the creationist and evolutionist community. And that's kind of the goal. Like, let's get together and discuss these issues. And we always get a good solid live chat, and the live chat's always very much engaged in the debate. So I enjoyed it, and obviously I try to stay neutral as moderator. But now that the debate's over, I'm certainly excited to discuss some of the points that were brought up. So I appreciate you doing this, John.
Of course. Always happy to do that. Before SOS takes his turn, just want to let everybody know that, whoa, getting some feedback there. Tomorrow morning, I'll be finishing up editing of week number 2's Flashback Friday, where we'll be, and tomorrow's subject matter will be how I came to debate Godless Engineer. And then there'll be some little clips of that all put together. So you won't want to miss tomorrow's Flashback Friday, week number 2. And you can also thank Slavic for giving me grief for several months about how I need to start doing clips. So I've decided to get that done. So I was working on some of that today. Should have finished up tomorrow morning, and then sometime probably like noon, 1 o'clock, I'll do a little short premiere of that. All right. Up next, we've got SOS. What's going on? Welcome to the stream. Have you been on here before?
No, but you guys know me. I'm a soldier of science. That's what SOS is.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
yep.
What's up, man?
Yep. Hey, so first of all, standing for truth. Good job, man. Good presentation. I think you always do a good job with debates. I think I'll give credit to Kent for trying to beat the debate record. I hope he gets there. I think that's pretty awesome as well. But at the same time, like it is kind of the same debate over and over, and for me, it's like watching someone try to prove why the tooth fairy is real versus someone who doesn't believe in the tooth fairy, in all honesty. And even furthermore, I'm quite impressed that you guys have such a great study of your apologist arguing points, and still can simultaneously put on a show like this is incredible for me, in all honesty. But I just have to ask you guys, since I've now seen like 5 of these, do you think that Kent constantly trying to say, hey, you know what, it could only have been a rapid flood scenario which created all these fossils? Do you think him saying that while at the same time knowing that in modern times we've seen a tsunami in Japan and a tsunami in Southeast Asia that's created no rapid fossils? Is that a problem for his argument? What do you guys think?
Okay, so we're not quite ready for questions yet. That's
okay. That's what I wanted to bring up. But
so you air your thoughts about the debate.
Yep. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good debate. Okay, Let's leave it at that. Yep.
All right. Then after we get to Otangelo's up next, then we can go into more open discussion. Okay. So Otangelo, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. How you doing? And most importantly, before we get going, how is your mother doing? And how are you doing?
Yes. Hello, guys. My mother is better, and I hope that she will be soon released from the recovery institution. But my dad, he did take a painkiller for his teeth about 2 days ago, and now he's in bed and he has high pressure, and I am very concerned about that situation. And my uncle, my dad's brother, he also was recently in hospital because he has some problems with his lungs. He did smoke almost his whole life, but he's 83 and it's a miracle that he's still alive. So yeah, it is a little bit a concerning situation. But I've not watched the debate, but whenever evolution comes up and I have the opportunity to say something about the topic, then I like to do it. So I think that, as Donnie has said some time ago, that Kent, he does a great job in what he does, but when it comes to evolution, in order to elucidate what actually the real mechanisms are that are involved in constructing complex organisms and development, we have to look into the molecular situation in that level. And Kant doesn't do that because he's not trained into do that. And I think there are very few actually who understand these mechanisms. And I think you, John, since you understand about abiogenesis, you tackle that also pretty well. And I think if we want actually to beat that, then we need to be educated on that level. And we need to understand what the real mechanisms are. And once we understand that, then we also can say, well, this is what has to change if we want to bring evolution into the picture, that one organism can change into another. And as it comes out, based on what I have studied, the real picture is much more complex that we commonly and that most people actually acknowledge. And it's not just on a genetic, but in special on an epigenetic level. And I have said it many times, there are over 45 different epigenetic languages and codes, which are all involved in a joint venture, in an interdependent manner together to confer the multicellular complexity. And science hasn't even still yet unraveled all these mechanisms, and there is much more to come. So, yeah, I would say when we then try to figure out about the origin of all this complexity, then an intelligent designer is the best explanation.
Well said. I'd have to agree with you on that. Although every other possible explanation makes it more probable than the necessity of a preceding intelligent agent. So I don't know if you missed the memo on that, but that is the standard atheist talking point right now. Okay, so folks. Okay, Wesley, you got to remember to put mute on, buddy. Okay. All right, Wesley, you're up, man. It's your turn if you want to say anything about the debate real quick. How you doing?
The debate about dinosaurs, I can tell you exactly what they are. In heaven, 1/3 of the angels follow Satan.
Wesley, right now we're on the round robin for talking about the debate. So right now we got to talk about the debate. Did you see it?
No, I'll hold comment then and listen to what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, well, we can get into a lot more of that stuff later on. Okay, so we can now go back to, I think Soldier of Science had a question he wanted to bring up about the topic of the debate tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah. Basically, I was asking, do you think that Kent's, I've seen him do it in the last like 5 debates where he says, fossils can't happen, or they don't happen over millions of years. It makes more sense that it was like a rapid flooding event, like a worldwide flood. And so my question is, and what amazes me is none of the atheists have brought this up as a debate to him, but how come we don't see this rapid fossilization at recent tsunami events, such as the one in Japan? I think that was 2004, and then I don't remember which year, and in Southeast Asia where like 250,000 people died. That was a huge rapid flooding event. How come we don't see fossilization in those events?
Okay, so am I going to be the one to answer this? I know there's a bunch of people on the panel, but whoever wants to answer, I have no problem answering it. But
go ahead.
Okay, sure. Good question. And after a little back and forth on this, though, I do want to jump into what was one of the main arguments of the night, which was ERVs, specifically pertaining to evolution. I sent a link to Snake. We'll see if he joins. I'd love to discuss it with him. So local tsunamis today, it's going to come down to environmental factors. It's going to come down to the fact that the worldwide flood was what? It was worldwide. And typically today, right, we know millions and millions of animals die today. And how many are fossilized? Probably none. And it's because environmental factors would essentially prevent that organism from forming. What's required is the fact that the organism that dies needs to be covered by sediment and then protected. And that's where you can get rapid fossilization quickly. And, we've seen this in real-time events like at, when it comes to sedimentary layers, at least at the eruption of Mount St. Helens. But we have examples of this in the fossil record, like examples of fish being eaten, fossilized. That's obviously rapid burial. Fish giving birth. So some local tsunami in Japan, I don't think you're looking at the massive number of animals that you'd be looking at in a worldwide flood.
You don't think any of them had a rapid covering event during a tsunami, which went inland for miles, where 250,000 people died in Southeast Asia? You don't think that there wasn't like millions of small mammals that were buried rapidly, and not one single shred of evidence of a modern fossilized squirrel, dog, cow, any of those?
So hang on one second. So are you suggesting that rapid burial equals rapid fossilization, like the actual mineralization taking place?
No, that's what Standing for Truth just said. Standing for Truth just said it was environmental conditions, and in the worldwide flood that there was an event that buried rapidly millions of creatures. And I'm retorting back. You don't think
SOS? Calm down, bro. You clearly, as usual, you didn't actually listen to what he said.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that the point you were making was twofold. Number one, that the level of full-scale rapid burial on a mass scale that we observe in the fossil record is not what's taking place in a local tsunami.
Exactly.
Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, even if burial is taking place from tsunamis, right? If you're talking about things like the Japanese tsunami, right? Fukushima, whichever one it was, right? But I forget which one you referenced. But the fossil is in no way, shape, form, or fashion. Correct me again if I'm wrong, Donnie. You're not suggesting that they would already be fossilized, or that the fossilization from the flood context would be like, oh, within like 2 years they're going to be completely fossilized. The fossilization process is going to totally take place, and they're going to be freaking rock. Were you saying that, Donnie?
No.
Okay, so if you weren't saying that, then why aren't we seeing this from the tsunami, i.e. Fukushima, et cetera, why aren't we seeing this has no relevance because enough time has not passed for the actual fossilization process to take place. Is that a fair summation, Donnie?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the same time, we can get rapid fossilization as long as the body of the organism, a soft-bodied animal, is protected from scavengers, from decomposition, and you have rapid burial in sediments, water, mud, for example. Then you can have rapid formation of
that was that's Kent's argument. Yep.
As long as it's quickly buried by, and an example of this is the fact that we have fish in the middle of dinner that are fossilized, fish in the middle of giving birth. It doesn't take millions of years.
I mean, how long do you think, in your opinion, how long do you think a rapid fossilization is? Given that the worldwide flood was
the soldier of science. Listen, man. So you do realize that they have pulled it off within 24 hours in the lab, right?
No, I don't. I didn't realize that.
May I respond?
But I mean, again, why don't we have any, not like one single one from Japan or Southeast Asia? Not like one. There isn't one where someone came up and said, "Hey, look at this squirrel that was rapidly buried in
maybe I can
not one."
Maybe I can answer it.
Hang on. So Otangelo can go, and then Brett has something more to say, and then we'll circle back around. Go ahead, Otangelo.
I think mainstream science isn't doubting about a flood event. And recently in Daily Mail, they came out with a fossil, and they wrote the fossilized leg pictured once belonging to a dinosaur known as so-and-so was likely ripped off in a flood, according to researchers. Now, what they are claiming that there was an asteroid impact, like in Mexico, for example, which caused that flood, that local flood, which then buried these dinosaurs. So I don't think that mainstream science is doubting that such burial events happened, but they don't attribute to Noah's flood, but to these asteroids. And they say there were 5 distinct mass extinction events. And something else, recently there was a post of Günter Bechli, and at his timeline in German, and where he said he explains the fossil proofs, what they really indicate. And then I posted and I said, well, in my understanding, they indicate Noah's flood. And then he replied and said, Noah's flood cannot possibly explain the taxonomic order or biostratigraphy in the fossil record. Proposed IEC explanations all fail miserably because the fossils are not ordered by ecosystems or by hydrostatic drift ability. So I asked him how he backs that up, and then he sent me a link to 2 books, and they are basically secular mainstream books, which all propose the common known old Earth scenario. So maybe Donnie, which is
secular mainstream, or just like scientific geology books.
Yeah, scientific geology.
Okay, there you go. That's a little bit different than secular mainstream, but thank you.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Did you just say that a textbook is not secular mainstream? So a textbook from that's used in
no. I'm
we're making clear clarifications.
Yep.
So, Otangelo, were you referring to textbooks that are used by universities and such?
Yes, he did indicate 2 books, which I can quote them here quick.
So you don't need to do that. I just want to reiterate when you phrase
bro, listen.
Secular mainstream, that is propaganda versus this is a science book.
Listen, Soldier of Science. Tonight, you are not going to be doing your usual obfuscation and attempt to like cloud the whole point of stuff, right? So
cloud.
You just tried to like make the impression that a textbook used at universities would be somehow different from secular mainstream. Like, you do grasp that is.
I grasp linguistics. I grasp linguistics and phrasing and phrasing. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you have no excuse for your bullshit then.
I have a
Sweet.
great respect.
Awesome. So you're muted for right now, dude. Okay, Brett, you had a question, something you want to bring up.
Well, the original claim Mr. SOS brought up is incorrect, by the way. Donnie did some great answers on the environmental, but he said that we've never seen modern day fossils. I can give a link right now where it says in 2019, a team found fossil records of the immediate hours after, including evidence of debris swept up by the resulting tsunami. I have a hard time pronouncing that word. That's rough. Now researchers have discovered enormous ripples engraved by the tsunami in sediments 1,500 meters, 5,000 feet below what is now central Louisiana. So it's right there. It's just a simple Google search.
Right there. You've got an answer. SOS has an answer. There were fossils formed, apparently.
Japan.
So what would be your answer to Beckley's critique that he says that the biostratigraphy is not indicating a worldwide flood? He says here the taxonomic order biostratigraphy in the fossil records proposed by young Earth creationists explanations all fail miserably because the fossils are not ordered by ecosystems or by hydrostatic driftability.
Well, I think he's assuming. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what would you say to that?
Well, first I would say check out our 5-hour conference we just had on that very thing that ended yesterday. We had John Mackay, the creation guy, and Joe Hubbard give some fantastic presentations on the erroneous assumptions behind that argument when it comes to the geological column and assuming that those are the result of long periods of time, right? Which it doesn't really make any sense. Where a good question is, where's this material coming from to form these new layers, as Ken Hovind always asks, outer space? But anyways, I'd recommend watching that. And I need some more details on what he's saying, because that is primarily what we see. Is we see, well, for one, we see marine fossils all throughout the fossil record. We see marine fossils with dinosaurs, with mammals, all the way at the bottom of the so-called geological column. And we do see communities. We see different types of communities all throughout the fossil record, groups of different types of animals, groups of dinosaurs buried together, groups of mammals, groups of different types of creatures like therapsids. So certainly burial by ecosystems and communities, I don't think can be ruled out. But I think the bigger picture has to do with the underlying assumptions that these layers were formed over deep time. That would be my quick answer, but a long answer would be found in the conference we just hosted. So
yeah, the question really is, why do they propose that there were 5 distinct extinction events? And why do they claim that there were asteroids which caused these floods and then the fossilization?
Well, here's the thing too. Sorry, I was on mute. Here's the thing too. When you debate these evolutionists, they'll be forced to admit that the evidence does suggest that the entire Earth was once underwater. Now, they don't say it was once underwater at the same time. Okay, and an important point that John Mackay pointed out in the conference is that according to the biblical model, the entire Earth was covered underwater twice during the creation week, right? Before the creation of the land, and then obviously animals and man, and then also during the flood, the world that then was being overflowed with water perished. And the evolutionary community is forced to admit this because, yeah, we see marine fossils that are on mountains and in landlocked areas that are far from the sea. We know these sedimentary rock layers extend over entire continents, okay, which means the deposition of these layers had to have been catastrophic, which means these underlying assumptions behind the geological column and apparently the assumption that these layers were formed over deep time, they are erroneous. And back to the original question, yeah, that's what we find is fossils of animals giving birth, fish being eaten. And we have many examples today of petrified fossils, petrified wood, petrified pickles, petrified hats. So no, it doesn't take long to form fossils. And the fact that Noah's flood covered the entire planet, I think that's personally the best explanation. And burial by communities and ecosystems is being looked at among other reasons for the ordering of the fossil record. But I'll end it there. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, real quick, guys.
Sorry, guys, my sound went out. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, Wesley's
May I speak?
Wesley's been raising his hand for a while. What's going on, man? What's on your mind?
Hey, guys. I applaud you. Your subject is very interesting to me and one I've been interested in since second grader in school. As evidence that what I speak is the truth, Jesus socket one of their teeth in every one of their mouths. There was never dinosaurs roaming the earth. Never happened. Jesus turned 1/3 of his angels into the dry bones in a moment's time. They were 1/3 that refused to say, I failed Jesus not believing in his forgiveness. I saw a foot that didn't bleed that got cut off. I failed Jesus not getting involved. I saw palm trees with orange red in the bottom dark green leaves and the top leaves dark green and weeds and crabgrass grew under them. 1/3 of the angels of Jesus in heaven, where it was all good, refused to say that. And Jesus cast them out of heaven and turned their bodies into the dry bones under the ground in the shapes of dinosaurs. That's how they got there.
Well, that is definitely a very interesting hypothesis.
The only evidence and proof I have is if you felt a little thought on a tooth in your mouth, it is the truth.
In a literal echo chamber.
Serious.
Yeah, it's difficult.
He's quite far away from his mic, so that
you can call me Spaceman Spiff.
Hey,
you're comfortable though, Wesley. I'll give you that.
I just want to give a shout out to. I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Bible Research out there. Man, sorry about your COVID. I'm glad you're doing better. Nobody likes to hear that.
No,
Hey,
no,
let
it's
me,
actually, hang on. It's actually very good news about Dan. He was in ICU for I think 6 weeks.
Oh, I mean, that's what I
then-
meant. It's good news
and then-
he's doing better.
Yeah, then
Yeah,
he's been
amen.
in rehab for I think almost 8 weeks, and then he's finally been able to get discharged. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
And
awesome. It's awesome. Good to hear.
went from being on very high levels of oxygen, and it's slowly going down. So it's fantastic that he has been able to make it home. Hopefully, even though he's after surviving ICU and rehab, hopefully he won't be irritating his wife so much that he magically doesn't survive. So I mean, if Dan disappears, we'll know that it's probably because he was irritating his wife by trying to be on live streams late night. So when he was
Oh
in
my
ICU,
gosh.
when he was in ICU and rehab, he could engage in his internet obsession and addiction. But now that he's back home, I don't know. We'll have to see if his wife's going to let him get away with it now. But okay, so a couple shout outs. Looks like Brain Bugs in the side chat. Come on in, get in the stream, get in the conversation, and we'll get some things going on here. But now Jackson has got his Rambo bandana on, and he got his hand up. So what's up, man? What's on your mind?
Yeah, this is unrelated, but you guys want to see something cool?
Go
Sure.
for it.
We're looking at something cool. That headband of yours.
Yeah, my friend from Damascus, Syria, sent me this picture. Let me see if it'll focus on it. It says, "Jackson, hello from Syria to Arkansas, USA."
Wow.
So he was a soldier. Anyway, you guys want? I've got some other cool stuff. If I don't want to waste everybody's time, but it's cool.
So I'd say the most interesting thing from Ukraine I've seen recently is the video of all the quote unquote dead bodies.
Oh yeah.
And as they're driving down the road, the idiot with the camera forgets to not shine it in the rearview mirror, and you watch dead bodies get up off the ground after they're, oh my gosh, all the dead bodies, all the death and the horror, all the atrocities, and then you literally in the rearview mirror you see the person they just driven past, like this dead body, like get up.
So I mean, so even if that's staged, I mean, what does that say to like the bigger picture of Russia invading Ukraine? I mean, what does that say?
To invade Ukraine.
What?
I think Russia has every right. I mean, we do it to every nation we want to. Why can't they?
I just don't agree with that. I mean, because I also don't agree with us invading countries. So I mean, I think it was horrible. I mean, my brother served in the Marines in Afghanistan, and it changed him for life. He literally saw the U.S. bomb an entire village, and it's changed him for life, literally. And so I would say that, yeah, we are equally as bad, but it doesn't mean that someone else should do it too.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah.
So I mean, so getting back on debate and stuff, I want to ask you guys another serious question. What I mean, just because I'm not a religious person, to you, what does it mean when God says that man is made in his image? Is that a physical image, or is it just strictly speaking about the spirit? Like, to you, what does that mean?
Who wants to answer? But I do want to get to this ERV thing soon, since that was the main thing. But
okay,
if this is this a Q&A from
no, I mean, it's a serious question. I mean, it's a serious question for me.
It's gonna be another rabbit trail, though.
It might be a rabbit trail, but I honestly, like, for me, when I was a Christian, I guess I couldn't conceptualize that, to be honestly. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, well, one important distinction between animals and us is that we have free will, and we have a conscience about good and bad, and moral values. And animals, they just operate on instinct. And I think this is an important
That's not true.
thing which distinguishes us. And I think that in this regard, we are moral agents in as much as God is.
I mean, I've seen consciousness in all kinds of animals. I keep animals.
Yeah.
I mean, salamanders come to me to be fed.
No, when I am
but nothing like human. Nothing like
I'm not saying they're like humans. I'm just saying they're not robots.
Okay, I'm not saying consciousness, but conscient in a moral sense. When we do something which is evil, we have an understanding that it is wrong. And animals, they don't operate based on that. They operate on instinct. So if an animal kills another animal for food or so, it's completely different than we murdering another human being.
So I mean, do you think the passage of made in the image of God is based on like just a moral intelligence of what God is, and it has nothing to do with our physical appearance?
No, I think it does have a little something to do with our physical appearance. I mean, Jesus, God himself, manifested himself in the flesh of a human, right? But I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that we are created uniquely. We are a special creation apart from all other forms of life. And there's something about us that reflects the divine. There's something about us that reflects the very character of God himself. And that's why a lot of theologians debate this, but a lot will point out the fact that humans, unique from the rest of the biological world, are made body, soul, and spirit, right? And that is why we have a connection to the divine. We pray before we eat, right? We have a spiritualness about us that animals don't have.
Right.
And so in a nutshell, a really simple answer is, there's something about us that reflects the divine.
But in your concept of, like, let's just put it this way, God existing before the universe was created, before humans were created, do you think that God has in any way like a physical resemblance of a human? Like just existing in whatever space before space and time existed, do you think he had a physical resemblance of humans, or it's just a purely conceptual idea about intelligence and morality?
Well, God the Father is spirit. The Holy Spirit is spirit. God the Son, right, which was the lamb slain before the foundation of the earth. So of course, the triune God, made up of three divine persons, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, foreknew exactly what would happen, foreknew the fall, and foreknew the fact that God the Son would be manifested in the flesh, manifested as a man, as a human being, because we are, as human beings, made in the image of God.
So therefore, part of it had to have like a physical resemblance, even if it was only like an idea of that physical resemblance.
Well, I think God's ultimate plan is he took us. There's some young earth creationists who would point out that humans are the archetype. And from humans, because evolutionists will point out nested hierarchical patterns, right? Why are humans more similar to chimpanzees than humans are to dogs, right? There's these groups within groups patterns. So some young earth creationists will point out that God foreknew the fall, foreknew, God the Son coming down, manifesting himself in the flesh, took man as an archetype, right? Built man, and from man and the understanding of man and how man is built, created other forms of life, other primates that are similar, dogs. But it was all from the starting point of man himself. It was made
so here's the rabbit hole. You know where it's going. Here's the rabbit hole is, if God had a foreknowledge of that physical resemblance of a human, why would God need any of the physical traits of a human, like a nose for breathing air, or like eyes for seeing, or even eating? Like, why would you need any physical traits for food when you just like live forever and food is just, you're just consuming other cells? Why would any physical traits that are necessary for humans to exist in this world, why would that be preordained in the triune God? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I'm not sure if I'm totally understanding your question.
Why would God have to look like a human? Because if humans, their very physiology is based on our environment, being able to breathe, being able to see light, being able to, these are all physical things that happen in the physics of our universe. Right. Why would even a triune God need any of those physiology that would resemble a human in any way, shape, or form?
Well, he didn't. It's God the Son, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, that was manifested in the flesh as a human being. But there wasn't really anything necessary into it. It's not like God the Father looks like a human being.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. That's what I wanted to clarify.
I would like to add to that. The Bible
Go
doesn't
ahead.
make a description, a physical description of God from in past eternity, how he looked like. Now, what we know actually is that Christ, he did resurrect, he did receive a new transformed body, and it resembles to the body that he had here on earth. And we see that also in Revelation. So it is pretty much possible that he is transformed and appears as a physical, with a physical appearance to us for all eternity, so that we can interact as humans with him as the firstborn of the new creation.
That's
All
a
right,
good response, Otangelo. That's very good.
Yep. Right before we continue on this, we have a new guest on the panel. What's up, Kelby? How you doing? Welcome to the stream.
Hey.
What are your thoughts on tonight's debate? And yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Very intriguing as always. Just real quick on the particular point at hand. In terms of why, like, an eternal being would have a nose, and then you guys very well touched on the second person of the Trinity being all aspects of a form existing of the eternal Father. And as far as why that form would consist of a nose, I just want to point out that the entire concept of form in general is a manifestation of sorts of the second person of the Trinity, if that makes any sense, because all eternity is where the Father is, or quote unquote where, but the second person is form. So if what we have in our form as a nose or a sinus or an ear are our own manifestations within our own framework or dimension or whatever, but what they represent are an ability to interact with our environment in certain ways. So I would just say that they're just a similar archetype in that they are interactors with environments, so that they're not necessarily so alien to each other, if I'm understanding your point, between a human being having a respiratory system and God, and God having something that is analogous to it in his form.
Maybe something else to add to this. When we read in Revelation, then we read about 7 or 14 spirits of God, so multiple spirits. But at the same time, we read about the triune God. And I was thinking about that. What does that mean? And I was also thinking about the final judgment at the white throne. And I was thinking, how will that happen? Is it that only God will speak to each of us and judge? Is it that he will employ angels, which will take books of our lives where it is all written down, and he will just give the final word? How will that be? But I think that if God transcends all reality, and if he is at the same time everywhere, that means that, like, for example, I can feel my finger, but I can also feel my leg at the same time. So I have a sense experience at the same time of different parts. So I can imagine that God also can think in parallel, and that his spirit is not like ours, which just can sense or perceive just one thing. He can perceive at the same time all reality. And so I could imagine that maybe a final judgment, that he can actually interact with billions or tens of billions of souls at the same time. I don't see that this would not be possible. And if it would be sequential, I have calculated that until now there have lived in 7,000 years or so about 70 billion people. And in average, let's suppose that every person which would live 70 years it would be about 800 million words. And if, as Jesus said, that he would judge each of our words, that would be 10 to the 22nd power of words. That would be the number of stars in the entire universe. That is a huge number of words, which would have to be judged with even more words. And if you calculate how much time that would take, it would be absolutely a huge amount of time. So I can imagine that eventually God can judge in parallel and interact in parallel with each person.
I'd say it's unquestionable.
Sorry, guys. I'm on this StreamYard on my phone, and it's crazy.
But no,
I appreciate.
Hang on, we got a new guest to the panel.
Oh, go ahead.
What's up, James Dare? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. Did you see the debate? If so, what are your thoughts on it? If no, what brings you to the stream? And do you have what's on your mind?
I saw bits and pieces of the debate. I thought it was rather interesting. I'm really interested in the ERV argument from the evolutionist side. It seems to me like they try to claim that similarities are evidence for evolution, and I think it's a weak argument. I want to dig into that side of science, because I really think they fail when they say similarities are evidence. That's my opinion. That's what I saw anyways. It's interesting to watch these debates. But thanks for allowing me on.
No, of course. Thanks for coming. I know that Donnie's been waiting for somebody to bring up or the conversation to circle back around to ERV. So I think the real question about what James just brought up is, are you a plant from Donnie to bring the conversation back to ERVs?
Fair enough, but yeah, let Donnie go. Let Donnie go. This is what we're here for.
Hey, James, I'll toss you $20 if you join John's after show and bring on ERVs. You accept PayPal, right?
You told me $50.
Fair enough. I'll give you $5.
$5 Canadian, so equivalent to. No, I mean, it looked like Jackson left. I know he's the one that kind of wanted to debate that, but now he's gone. Come on, Jackson, come on back in here. I got to say though, good questions from SOS, and some very interesting answers all around on the panel, especially from Otangelo. Great points, brother. And typically, that's what I point out in my debates, and even in my books, that there's a lot of debate surrounding the image of God, the fact that we are image bearers, and the fact that we have a connection, right? That's essentially a broken connection without unregeneration. But when you're regenerated and that connection is essentially reestablished, and you now have fellowship, where Adam and Eve had fellowship before they fell. But I point out, since there's obviously something, all debate aside, there's something about us that reflects the divine. And I like to point out, when it comes to the evolution topic, that means we should be able to get a sense for how God designed the biological world, how God designed things based on the way we design things. Since there's something about us that reflects the design, or the designer being image bearers. And that kind of brings us to ERVs.
Hey, Donnie, before you get an ERV, can I say one thing about that, and I'll let you go off on the ERV point. Yeah, would you then agree that since God made Adam and Eve before the fall, originally before they actually sinned, they were meant to live forever, that God absolutely knew that they were going to sin by giving them the physiology that they would need to survive on Earth? Because obviously, if you make Adam and Eve to live forever, you wouldn't need the nose to breathe air. You wouldn't need an intestine or stomach bacteria or a butthole, for example, to process food. You wouldn't need any of that if you were going to live forever. Would you agree with that statement, that God created them knowing that he was going to make them have to not live forever after the fall?
Well, it comes back to the classic argument that theologians have been making for years and years, that God didn't want to create robots. I mean, I could force my wife to love me, I guess, put her in a headlock and say, love me. No, I want her to love me willingly. And that's what God wants. And yeah, he created Adam and Eve to live perfectly. And we know that just through studying genetics.
But their physiology.
I'm not done. Wait, I didn't
Okay.
We know from genetics alone that we have the ability, the potential to essentially live forever. I mean, we have a lot of longevity genes that have been broken. There's a lot of epigenetic switches that if they were, turned back on or functioning appropriately, we could live to probably 1,000 years. So yeah, God created man originally to live forever. Through his foreknowledge, he knew that we would fall. And because of a fallen world, this has brought in corruption, degeneration, mutations that are obviously damaging and deleterious to our systems. And but one day in the new heaven and new earth, we will live forever again. If you're saved, you will live forever on this earth. We will be in our physical bodies on this earth with a nose, with a.
To me, that's a big problem with the statement of, yeah, God created Adam and Eve knowing that they would fall. I mean,
well, do you think you could
just that alone? Like he didn't want a robot.
Hang on. Before we go, gentlemen, hang on. Before we go down this rabbit hole, so the free will defense, the free will defense, and then and allowing for free will.
There you go.
Like answers this whole question. Plantinga derived this 30 freaking years ago, and it's been accepted.
No one's accepted this argument, actually. An omni foreknowledge defeats when you say he didn't want robots, but he created them knowing they're going to fall. Is a robot. That's a robot. That's a robot that's going to fall.
Soldier,
shut up. You are a moron.
Okay, listen, silence, everybody. SOS. I don't know. I know that you never actually go and research this stuff.
I do.
Really? Have you read Plantinga's?
Yeah. I've read all of the philosophical arguments, cool. and they're bunk.
Okay, dude. I'm going to put you backstage if you interrupt me one more time. Okay. Now, in regards to the mainstream philosophy universe, right? The logical argument that you're talking about and referencing here is defeated by, and it's accepted as being defeated by the mainstream in relation to the free will defense. Okay. Now there's the evidentiary and the excessive problem of evil and all that kind of stuff that is still a question. But the logical position is accepted as being defeated by Plantinga's defense.
By Plantinga's, yeah. By Plantinga's. There's a lot of people who disagree with Plantinga's, right?
No, not.
Yeah.
It is recognized as from the free will defense.
For an apologetic standpoint, yes.
No. From mainstream.
No, mainstream disagrees.
I forget the guy who originally came up with the whole point of why. I forget the guy's name now. That Plantinga came up with the free will defense for. Okay, but that guy literally conceded that Plantinga's free will defense overcame his argument, which was the thing that was, it's been defeated. Oh, God doesn't exist because of X, right? He conceded himself.
I just defeated it by explaining to you. God made Adam and Eve with a nose because he knew that.
God, dude, you get dumber by the freaking time I
interact with you. He made them with the nose because God created man to inhabit an earth that has oxygen, you moron.
and I already explained to him, so I don't know how he envisioned.
Donnie, I appreciate the way you explained it. It was good, but you're missing the whole point. Like, God designed us to originally live forever, but he designed us to live forever on Earth, and Earth has oxygen, and he designed us to breathe, you idiot. Does any air go to your brain?
So why would you need to breathe if you're going to live forever, my friend?
Because that's how God chose to do it. You got a problem with
really? You need to breathe. You need to breathe an invisible gas to live forever.
Yeah.
Life is motion. Motion is breath. Breath is
if you're gonna live forever, can't you just go in the ocean? Couldn't you walk around the bottom of the ocean floor?
Full scale dumpster fire. I dig it. I love it.
I mean, if you're going to live forever, right? Couldn't you just walk around on the bottom of the ocean floor? Why would you need to breathe air, my friend? Why would you need to eat?
Can you name me a life form that?
So you're saying you can
right now? I love to breathe.
Do you honestly think that you would need to go through the process of eating food and crapping twice a day, and having to work to get money to get food? Do you think that you would need food to live forever if God was making you to live forever. That is ridiculous.
Doesn't enjoy living.
Everybody calm
Why
down.
not?
Guys,
Apparently, it's
everybody
like
be
a
quiet.
curse to you.
Everybody be quiet. Everybody be quiet. We have some new people who have joined in. So
Hi.
Dog's Dogma has joined, and I think he's an atheist. What's up, Dog's Dogma? Did you see the debate, or have you just joined the?
I didn't see the debate, but I was told about the debate by like fans of your show, big fans. I was wondering. So you guys are talking about the free will defense, right?
Just talking about no, we're not. That's not the subject of this whole conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was just in context of SOS's usual dumbass talking points that have been annihilated forever, but he never actually goes and looks at things and regurgitates the same crap. And now he's arguing that, oh, God does not exist because we freaking breathe oxygen. I mean, it's like
apparently
you guys literally said oxygen is going to be in heaven. Come on, what Christian believes heaven has oxygen?
You obviously have no understanding of basic eschatology, so you know what? We might.
Donnie, he can't. What does the Bible say? The natural man understands not the things of God.
Exactly. I mean, apparently SOS thinks heaven is going to be us floating in the sky.
And apparently you think heaven has oxygen.
Well, there's a
heaven and a new earth.
Hey,
God created us to enjoy the earth that He created us on.
Was God breathing oxygen before He created the universe?
Soldier of Swinus, why don't you get lost? You're an idiot.
Hey.
SOS, do you believe you're related to a banana plant? Yes or no?
So angels and God, who existed before the universe, breathe oxygen?
Your little cross-examination is done. I'm going to start asking you questions.
It has to do with motion. Life is motion. It's
Bible.
Spirit. Has nothing to do with molecules. It's everything having to do with motion. That's life. Life is motion. Angels moved. God moves. He has a spirit. God lives. We breathe. Breathing is motion. That's life.
Revelation is pretty clear and says
breathing is life.
May I ask us a question?
Hang on, everybody, calm down. Hang on, we're gonna have a little moderation here. Okay, so Bubblegum Gun just joined us, so he gets to air his opinion on the debate and whatnot, and then Brett, you can ask us a question. Go ahead, Bubblegum.
Yo, can you guys hear me loud and clear?
Yep, coming through.
All right. I don't think Kenton did too well. I think Snake took that debate. What was it? Yeah, I think you guys can't answer this kind's argument. I think that's your Achilles heel, and you guys are gonna eventually have to give that up. I mean, if you don't, I mean, because look, you have to reveal why you guys keep pushing this. Like,
so, Bubblegum, when are you going to get saved, man? And stop being.
Well, wait a minute. Listen, I want to answer Bubblegum's question about kinds. Okay, Bubblegum, we have answered the question of kinds, and the best definition of kinds that we've been working with is groups of organisms that go back to a common genetic pool.
Come on,
we've already determined various kinds of creatures that do go back to a common genetic pool that does not go back to other genetic pools that's separate from other genetic pools. One of those is man. Humankind, the kind called human. You ever heard of them, Bubblegum?
Yeah, and it's all nonsense, and you know it.
Oh, prove it. Okay, wait a minute. Donnie said the definition I just provided you, we've actually determined that humans are their own separate created kind.
You can't demonstrate.
Go ahead. Rebut my point.
You can't demonstrate this kinds event in the same way.
I've already demonstrated with the Y chromosome, the mitochondrial DNA function, linkage blocks that humans go back to their own common genetic pool. Okay. You can trace back chimpanzees and bonobos to their own common genetic pool. That doesn't belong in the genetic pool of humans.
No, the mere fact that we have races.
We don't have races.
Yes, we do. It's genetic.
Every single human being. Okay.
Are you another one of these liberals who denies Jason's genetic?
Yeah, race is a human construct.
Hang on. Bubblegum, answer this question. Is someone from Africa fertile with someone that lives in like Canada?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. You fucked up, buddy. You fucked up.
Answer the question, you demonic imbecile.
Buddy, you know what? You just effed up. Guess
Are
what?
they infertile? Yes or no, Bubblegum?
Their children are more infertile. That means they're not compatible.
That is not true. It's not true at all.
That is true.
It's not true at all.
They have children. That means they're the same kind. There's only one race. It's called humans.
No, the children are more infertile. mixed race children are more infertile. That means they're
That
not
is absolutely not true.
Nonsense.
That is
You are
absolutely
a
true.
buffoon.
Nonsense.
Yeah,
That
but
is
that's
true.
That's
I'm not really sure.
100% not true.
All right, all right,
100%
okay.
true.
Okay, hang on. We will address that dumpster fire in a moment.
It's 100% true.
Brett has a question.
Triggered.
It's his turn. It's Brett's turn. Go ahead, Brett.
The question was originally for SOS, but the atheists who've arrived into the room, they're more than welcome to attempt to answer this as well. If we're going to go with the concept of evolution, can any of you give a naturalistic explanation on where pain receptors came from?
I'm just not familiar enough with pain receptors to respond to that.
Okay, SOS, tell us where the respiratory system came from. How did that evolve since you have a problem with breathing? Go ahead.
Well, obviously, it didn't come from God because God intended for us to live forever. Why would I need to
that's a
breathe?
logical fallacy. And
Why would I need to breathe oxygen?
I've
right?
answered your questions. I've answered your questions for the last hour. Answer my question. Where
I
did
just
the
answered it.
respiratory system come from?
Comes from evolution.
Okay, listen, that's not an answer. It comes from evolution. How old are you?
Donnie,
Okay,
evolution
provide a
done did it.
sophisticated response, SOS.
Yep. I mean, apparently, God had to make me breathe oxygen because heaven has oxygen, according to you guys.
SOS is incapable of a
that crap.
sophisticated
It's
discussion.
motion. It's breath.
We engage his
Oh,
questions
this
for the
guy
last hour.
stinks.
Then we ask him two simple questions. How do you explain pain receptors? How do you explain the respiratory system? And what does he do? He dodges, he ducks, he dips, he dives, he dodges all over the place because SOS is a troll. He's not.
I'm not a troll. I'm asking. I think I've asked you guys.
Don't overtalk me. Why did the beginning of your sentence start in the middle of mine? I'd like to know that. Now, SOS, answer this question. Where did pain receptors come from? Where did the respiratory system come from? As a matter of fact, where did your brain come from? Go ahead. Don't just say it came from evolution. That's a non-answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at. I mean, honestly, what's the question you're asking?
Simple question. If you believe that whales and banana plants are related through common ancestry and they go back to a universal common ancestry that came from non-living chemicals in some nice warm pond somewhere, explain to us how the incredibly designed respiratory system, explain to us how that evolved sequentially over time through mutations.
Yeah, I'm not an evolution. I'm not a scientist in the sense that I can explain evolution to you.
We can tell you're not a
but that's not the point. That's not the point. I've come on here. I've come on here, and I'm not a troll. I'm not a troll.
He's 0 for 4. You're a troll.
Hold on. I'm not a troll. I have asked you perceptions of what guys perceive.
We're going to hand it over to Brett Keane because he asked you a solid question. You had no answer. You just wanted to scoff at the Bible for the last hour.
Well, you're also
I'm not scoffing at the Bible. I as a former Christian, I have asked you some legitimate. I've asked you some legitimate questions. Your conception of physiology. That is an honest question. Like for me as a Christian, I honestly could not even conceive of the triunity. I still can't. I'll be honest with you. I cannot grasp it in my brain.
You're stuck on ideas like oxygen. I already said.
Not even that. Not even as a Christian, I could not conceive of the idea. And you could say I'm too stupid to conceive of the idea of a spirit and a physical being that is going to make itself look like humans because it's going to create humans. You can call me stupid. You can call me stupid for that, but I cannot conceive it. I can't conceive it.
SOS, how our airways, lungs, and blood vessels all evolved without a designer, naturalistically, through mutations, natural selection, and randomness. I don't know. I mean, what evolved first, the airways, lungs, or blood vessels? Can you answer that question, SOS? Which one evolved first?
I mean, obviously, you have animals that are breathing, like, and even like evolving, like single cells, evolving and organizing. They're going to adapt things that benefit them, right? Right,
Donnie, he's just going to duck and dodge because
I'm not ducking and dodging. I'm not ducking and dodging. I'm not ducking and dodging. And in all honesty, I would say that we've evolved. We've evolved some pretty crappy stuff, right?
What evolved first, the airways, the lungs, or the blood vessels?
I think that's a ridiculous question. It's a ridiculous question.
You cannot answer it.
It's a ridiculous question. It's like saying what would evolve first, the single cell or multi cells? It's a ridiculous question. It's not like what evolved first, a feathers or a chicken. Obviously, things happen slowly to benefit that organism over time, and it develops different physiology.
Stop!
I just did. I just did.
Do
It's
you
not
believe
as
that
simple as, oh, the oxygen, or, okay, so what evolved first? Your stomach bacteria or your intestines or your stomach? What evolved first?
it works in unison? Bacteria is incredibly
Oh,
important.
really?
We have more bacteria in and on our bodies than we do cells. We have more viruses in and on our body than we do cells. Okay.
So when God created Adam and
okay, I'm
Eve,
going to ask you again. Why does the beginning of all of your sentences always start in the middle of mine? Answer
I'm
that
sorry.
question. Go
Let me
ahead.
know when you're done. Go ahead.
May
No,
I?
I will
May
let
I?
you know when I'm done,
may I
and I'm
try
not
some-
done in the
Go
middle
ahead.
of my sentence.
Go ahead.
Okay.
May I try one
These
more
things-
question?
Yeah. I want to say this one thing. These things work in unison. It's evidence for design. It points us back to a designer. Bacteria works with our body. Viruses work with our body and our cells. We have more bacteria and viruses in and on our body than we do cells because they are working together, okay, for a purpose and for functional purposes for the living organism. Yeah, you don't have an explanation for. I want to know, but what came first? The bacteria, the viruses that are in our body that are helpful and beneficial for us to sustain healthy life processes in the cell.
This
What
is awesome.
evolved first? Since
It's
they
awesome.
all work together.
It's awesome. They all work together. So
is
COVID,
awesome.
COVID evolved at the same time as us
Again,
to be
you're dodging.
beneficial.
Again,
To
you're
be
dodging. What
beneficial.
evolved first?
To be
The cell or
beneficial
the
for
virus
what now?
or
For
the
what?
cell or the bacteria? What evolved first? The
To
cell or
be
the bacteria?
beneficial for what? And you're also saying that you're also saying that
the
God.
bacteria and the virus.
You're
You're the one
saying that
brought up
God
bacteria.
evolved. You use the word
guy just
evolved, by
keeps
the way.
going
John,
over
Make this guy
everyone.
answer the questions and
Hold on.
stop deviating.
You're also saying that God evolved stomach bacteria for humans because it knew
God
that Adam and Eve would
created.
fall. Because
No.
it knew Adam and Eve would fall.
Bacteria are
Deflection.
created. Our cell is incredibly designed. Okay. One single cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. You have 100 trillion cells. And guess what? In every single one of those cells, you have 3 billion letters of
It's awesome.
highly complex DNA code. It is awesome.
It's
How did
awesome
that
you believe
evolve?
in
How did
DNA
that
and don't
evolve?
believe in
Where did that
evolution.
come
It's
from?
awesome.
What
It's
came
awesome.
first? The cell or the
What?
bacteria? What came
Well-
first? The cell or the bacteria? Go ahead, SOS.
Yeah, the cell, obviously.
Well, wait a minute. We have more bacteria, beneficial bacteria, that are required to sustain healthy life processes in
It's
the cell.
amazing. So God
It's
made
amazing.
bacteria to sustain humans when He created Adam and Eve to live forever.
Are
Is that what you're
ridiculous?
admitting to me?
There
That
are
God
parts
needed
of an
bacteria
automobile-
to sustain
there are
Adam
parts
and
of the
Eve when He
computer
created
that
them
work in
to live
unison, that work
forever.
in combination for the functioning of the computer.
They
Did
cannot.
Our
They
cells
cannot
work
live
with
did
forever.
the bacteria,
did the
work with
bacteria
the
come
viruses,
after the
work
fall or
with a number of
before the fall?
systems in our body to help us function.
Did the
Okay? They
bacteria
work in
come after
unison.
the
They
fall
work in
or before the fall?
combination.
SOS, will you shut up?
Not answer my
He
question.
just keeps
Did the
talking
bacteria
over and
come
answered any
after the
questions.
fall or before the fall?
He's not
Anyway,
answering our
Since
questions. He just
99.9% of
rambles.
bacteria are beneficial and healthy to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. They're healthy and beneficial for our gut in a number of different reasons.
And we
They
didn't
were
need that if
created
we're going to
way
live forever,
because they
right?
are good. The Bible says
Why
God
are you
We were
created
never
us
gonna
for
live
good.
forever.
Harmful
You were-
bacteria came through mutations, through environmental factors, okay? Through factors that were not present in a pre-fallen world. I mean, oftentimes you'll find that these bacteria that result in disease, they're actually a degenerate form of a good bacteria. So if humans were created with nothing but good bacteria, there'd be nothing wrong with that. It's nice. It's great design. You have no explanation for how these good bacteria came
Why
about.
would you need good or bad bacteria if you were going to live forever?
You're like a 5-year-old. Your questions
I mean,
are like a 5-year-old.
answer a simple question.
Why, Daddy?
You wouldn't need any
any
bacteria at all, zero bacteria, if you were made to live forever.
What do you think we would need?
You wouldn't need any. You wouldn't need
Doesn't
air.
make any
You wouldn't
sense.
need
That
to.
makes
You wouldn't
no
need to
sense.
eat
It wouldn't
food.
need anything. We would just be nothing. Spirit.
If you created an organism that was going to live forever, would you need it to eat another organism in order
your
for it to
opinion.
live?
You don't like
They
to eat?
were
You don't
never
enjoy
created to
food
live
and
forever.
fruit and vegetables?
That's false.
I love eating. I love eating. You want to live in a world?
You
where
love
food,
eating because you're
fruit,
programmed to
vegetables?
love eating. You honestly think that you would
Yeah,
love to
and
eat?
guess what? I am going to live forever on a new heaven, a new earth.
You
where I get
honestly
to eat
think
the
you would love to
best
eat if you didn't
things
need to
ever,
eat?
the best fruits, the best vegetables.
So,
life
just let me ask you something. What is your narrative? How do we explain our existence without God? How do
Okay, let me give a quick reply. They're talking when they live forever. They're not talking about the body. All bodies will die. All organisms. They're talking about the spiritual body, and the quote unquote will live forever. For example,
You're wrong. You're wrong. Adam and Eve were physically meant to live forever before the fall.
No, they couldn't. It's impossible. No,
ask anybody here. Ask everybody here.
Wait.
Ask everybody here.
Wait. I'm not a Christian. I don't buy that bullshit.
Okay, so Christians believe that Adam and Eve.
Yeah, that was a BS lie.
So hang on. Bubblegum, be quiet for a second.
No, Adam and Eve were not created to live forever before the fall. Adam and Eve were created innocent. They did not have eternal life.
Down. Everybody calm down, okay? We're going to reestablish a little bit of rationality and
let's get the dumpster fire going.
The dumpster fire has been in full inferno for the last 45 minutes, okay? Now, for everybody here, let's all calm down. I mean, I get so worked up. Who is typing right now? Not on mute.
Oh, sorry, that was me again. I got to mute it. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Okay, so SOS. Obviously, you and I have had interactions going back well over a year and a half at this point on Nephilim Freeze channel, right? And late night, 4 a.m., you drunk as a skunk issues, right? So I'm going to need you to stop over talking to everybody and going bonkers, all right? We're going to allow other people to get engaged, and everybody in the room needs to allow folks to actually finish their points, sentences, and we're not going to get into like crazy over talking because nobody's actually going to benefit from all that. Dog's Domain, if there's other people that want to join, so I'm going to need you to either activate your mic again so I can bring you back in, or I'm going to have to boot you so somebody else can come in the room. Okay, so now that we've all calmed down a little bit, I think Bubblegum was talking when I interrupted everybody. Make your point, and then we'll get back into conversation.
I was just going to make the point that no, that Adam and Eve weren't supposed to be immortal because they're not gods. All things that were created will die, but they're talking about the physical body, not the spiritual body. And so
something up.
And so since they live within this universe, they need the power of God to like provide a safe haven for that spiritual body to go to. Because if you let that spiritual body fall back into chaos, it's gone. Ditto. That's it.
Logical and Donnie, may I ask a question?
Can I quickly respond to that?
You're not really a very quick person, but sure.
I am. Genesis obviously says that if you eat from the tree, on that day you will surely die. It is not a spiritual death. It is a physical death, which they don't die on that day, by the way.
That's
they begin to die, and then like 900, 800 years later they die. But that is a physical death. And so the only conclusion you can come to is that God knew that they were going to fall, and so therefore made them with a physiology to have to be able to live on earth. Because if you're a being that is going to create another being to live forever, there's no way they need the physiology to breathe, to eat, to do anything that physics of our universe requires you to do as a human being to live. None of that would apply. You're not going to make a robot that needs to eat other robots.
You honestly get dumber by the second.
I mean, you could say that. You could say that. That doesn't make your challenge any better.
Is this the argument? God gave us a nose, therefore he doesn't exist. I mean,
okay, let Otangelo answer.
Stupid, really.
Let me respond to that. There's a real easy answer to SOS's silliness. When God created Adam and Eve, he created them innocent, not with eternal life. They did not have eternal life. They were not created with eternal life. They had a choice. Thus, it goes back to our argument about free will. They had a choice between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, and they chose wrong. They made the wrong choice. They sinned.
There wasn't two trees.
Let me finish. You got to read the whole Bible, especially Genesis 1, 2, and 3. In the garden, in the midst of the garden, there was the tree of life. They had a choice. They could choose from the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they could also choose to eat from every tree other than the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They had a choice. They made a choice.
And if I could,
the world
Can
into
I
sin.
Before the
Can I answer
polytheist
now?
goes, I want to make a
John,
point.
can you give me the word? I would like to
Oh yeah,
answer.
yeah. Go ahead, Otangelo.
Okay, I had previously hypotheses what would have happened if they would have obeyed God and if they would not have eaten the fruit. And every time you make speculations on that, you come to absurd scenarios. Like, for example, did they have sexual attraction before they did sin? And if they had, would they have procreated? Would they have multiplied? If they had multiplied and not died, then in the future there would have been overpopulation. What would have happened in that situation? So I think there are no rational answers and explanations in regard of those scenarios. So I don't think that SOS is completely rational when he questions what would have happened if they would not have sinned. I don't think there are reasonable explanations and hypothetical scenarios how that would have developed if that would have been the case. Now, another thing that he said was that God had foreknowledge that they would sin, and then that as a consequence there could be no free will. No, he knew that they would sin, but that didn't take their ability of free choice and to make their decision.
I could add a couple points too, actually, before you go. I want to point out that, there's a difference between being immortal, which means we are incapable of dying. Adam and Eve were incapable of dying before the fall. There's a difference between being immortal and having eternal life, being born again, being regenerate. So no, Adam and Eve did not have eternal life, but essentially they were immortal. They would have lived forever. They would not have died if they had not eaten the forbidden fruit. Another thing I wanted to point out is the fact that God created man perfectly on an earth, in a garden specifically, with everything that they need, right? Fellowship with God, first of all, the most important thing. I mean, they walked with God. And food, the perfect balance, work, companionship, okay, so on and so forth. And we know today that there's animals where if they fill a niche, they'll reproduce. But when they fill a niche, there's a tapering off. And that could have been the case if Adam and Eve did not sin. Yeah, there would have been reproduction. Okay. It doesn't mean it would have been rapid reproduction. It would have been as much as needed. And when certain niches or environments are filled to their capacity, let's say with animals, then it kind of would have subsided there. I mean, we see that today with animals. It's almost like an innate design that allows for this. It is interesting. And then there was one other point I wanted to make based on something we were talking about earlier, but it skipped my mind. So I'll end it there. Go ahead.
Well, something else that I don't really grasp why it is so difficult for atheists to comprehend what I'm about to say. But the limitation, the position that somehow, if we're immortal, the world, and you kind of lose this too as well, Otangelo, but I think you're wrong on this. The premise that, if we're immortal, that we're going to overpopulate the planet and such, only has viability and relevance assuming that humans never learn how to leave the freaking planet. And if we're immortal, right, and there's IQs that are way higher than what we are now, right, then there's reasonable expectation that perhaps we learn how to create wormholes and bend space-time and all those other kind of things, and distances are no longer the barriers we think they are, or if time is what limits us from going distances, right? Crazy, like we currently don't live long enough. But if you've removed death from the equation, then going other places in a gigantic universe, which according to the atheists, why would God create this gigantic universe? Well, if we were originally immortal and not going to die, then the premise of going and exploring and taking, we were supposed to, conquer this planet, right? Well, and, tame it and own it and whatnot, right? Well, why does that same logic just not apply as you go out into the universe? And again, if death is no longer the barrier to it, then
the earth is flat, though.
I was thinking now, John, I was thinking now, well, maybe then there would have been an Elon Musk and Mars would have been a flourishing planet, and then when the risk was of overpopulation, we would have already developed rocket technology and we would have gone to Mars to populate another planet and then another one and then another one. And while the universe was expanding and creating new planets and so forth. So in that sense, then we would have created an interplanetary system and the universe full of planets with life.
The possibilities are endless when you can live forever on a perfect Earth, in perfect health, in perfect harmony. So yeah, that's a great point.
So what everybody was just wrong about, right, is about Elon Musk, is what they don't know is he's actually an incarnation of a spirit being. That's what actually is going on with Elon Musk. So he doesn't realize it, but he's actually he's a reincarnation. That's what's going on. That's why he's so has such vision to go populate Mars. But in all seriousness, though, they, as you just alluded to, Otangelo and Donnie, like, to me, I don't get why. To me, if everything I just talked about and we've been discussing, if again, for atheists in the audience who listen to this, put the big if prior to what I'm about to say, okay? If the position that's being taken that we were immortal is true, if that is true, then everything we've been talking about becomes entirely rational, like, and reasonable and entirely plausible, right? Like, cool, because right now, like, we're worried about radiation poisoning and how you're going to shield if you're trying to go between here and Mars, and like the negative effects of like low gravity on the human body and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, let's just say that we are able to figure out ways around that. Okay, then the premise of taking 6 months to get over to Mars is no big deal. Like, it's not a problem. We can go do that. No big deal, right? Same thing with, hey, think about it. If scientists had hundreds of years, the same ones, not new ones having to learn new things and start over again. I'm talking about, or build off previous guy. I'm talking the same guy, your team is able to work on a problem for hundreds of years, right? People have heard me go on this diatribe before. Like, if people still lived long times, right, or were immortal, then Leonardo da Vinci would still, and Einstein today would be working with Newton to solve problems and figure out solutions and new technologies and whatnot, right? New discoveries about the way the universe works, right? And obviously there'd be a whole bunch of other geniuses that be working with them, right? But just think about that. If Leonardo da Vinci, who was coming up with freaking helicopter technology, 600 years ago, right? And there's sketches of him. He had figured out the math. He just didn't have the ability to build it then, right? And the premises. If he had 600 years to figure this crap out, you don't think they could have solved a problem? Like, come on. Look what's been accomplished in the last century. We figured out. And you're telling me the same geniuses have 600 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years to solve these problems and they're going to come up with solutions? You guys are freaking idiots if your minds are so closed. I yield.
May I ask two questions? It'll be one question be for those of faith and the other be for the non-believers in the room.
Well, I think all the atheists left, but go ahead, Brett. Oh, and then when you get done, Crimson Air join us. He'll be up next. Go ahead, Brett.
Okay, so the first question to the non-believers would they be able to explain at what point in time males and females came into existence with sex drive as well as reproductive organs that stayed compatible over billions of years of species changes? That's for the non-believers. And for the immortality thing that we were talking about, my question is, if we're immortal, how would we be able to bear fruit and multiply unless we did eat from the tree which God would have had knowledge of?
I think it was all about timing, God's timing. I think he'd have let Adam and Eve know about the knowledge of good and evil in his time. I don't think he keeps anything from us as far as...
Here's the thing. There's multiple stories of this Adam and Eve. In the mystic one, it's not okay. Originally, it was this goddess who was assigned to Adam to be his girlfriend, but she found out the meaning because she's a goddess and he's not, and she rebelled and left the this government of gods, and so God made a partner for Adam, Eve. And that's how you get Eve. But there is highly something suspicious about this because there's also it's also a possibility you know how in the Bible it keeps referring, you have to bear fruit, and you don't call humans fruit unless you tend to eat them. And in a lot of these other gods, they eat human souls because they're not like ultimates, they're more like demis, and so they need substance.
Well,
So that could,
I didn't know we were going to get into God's eating souls and all that. My my question is when I read Genesis, I see not only what some would refer to as a curse, but I also see a blessing and a gift. God is giving mankind the ability to be able to reproduce, but he also puts a time limit on our existence. Just as Logical articulated, sure, we'd have our Da Vinci's, but could you imagine if a guy like Joseph Stalin, atheist dictator, could live for hundreds of years, what a world would be like existing?
Well, that was probably the case prior to Noah's flood, where people lived up to 900 years, and the Bible says that there was a lot of evil there.
but you see, I see this as an impossibility. Humans being immortal, that seems impossible to me. You need to be a god to be that, or at least a god providing you that energy, and the god isn't going to do that for free. So, like, mutations are going to happen regardless, whether there is or is no fall. And plus, if there was no scarcity, because the main reason we fight each other, kill each other, is because of resources, because of scarcity, because we hunger. That's the main reason we kill each other.
Well, the thing is that the Bible says in Revelation that God will create a new heaven and a new earth, and that the inhabitants there, they will live there forever. So this is something which will happen in the future.
Well, I approach this with highly suspicion, a lot of step by step. I'm very doubtful, highly suspicious of even gods having good intent for us.
Well, the Bible is clear. He will give eternal life to those which surrender and receive Jesus as Lord and Savior. And eternal life is meant aeon upon aeon, that's limitless, without an end.
Well, I certainly do believe in a heaven. I do not believe in a free will, though. There might be a heaven where these souls can escape chaos, because if they fall, because no human soul can overpower the powers of chaos. They would just be eradicated. So you need this heaven in which human souls can inhabit. But
you're missing the new. Yeah,
but
you're missing the new earth part that Otangelo is talking about. The new heaven and new earth. We will be here for all eternity on a new earth, living here. God's kingdom set up.
What wasn't it said that the meek will inherit the earth? And by meek, it sounds like he's talking about people with autism.
You know, I also see no problem by God creating creatures will live eternally, because He is eternal, and obviously He has eternal power at His disposition, and so He has also the power to create beings which will be eternally with Him. I see no problem with that.
Well, and that's why the triune God makes the most sense too, because we have God the Son, God the Father, God the Holy Spirit coexisting for all eternity in perfect harmony and fellowship. But the this idea of like a oneness God, or the God of Islam, essentially this was a God who lived in isolation,
right?
Who had no fellowship, who had no.
There cannot be love when there is no community, and of course there was an eternal loving relationship in the Trinity. And if the God of Islam would be that monotheistic God without anyone, he would have it would be hell for him, without any relationship with anyone.
Amen.
Yeah. But even things like love are conditional, so it would only be temporal.
Okay, guys, hey, real quick time out before we get going. Crimson Arrow's been here. He's been very patient. What's up, man? Welcome to the stream. How you doing? Did you see the debate, or anything on your mind you want to bring to the conversation?
Good evening, gentlemen. Yes, I watched the debate, and to comment on the debate, I felt that the snake was most strongest in his position when he leveraged on two occasions, I believe, the example of the algae going from a operating as a single-celled organism and then grouping together as a colony. And I wish that Kent had studied up on that, because there is a strong rebuttal to the argument of evolution, or rather using that algae colonization ability as in support of evolution. There is a strong pushback that he could have given, but I guess he hasn't. And this wasn't the first time that this issue was raised to him. I think Dr. Dan was the one that initially brought it up. I think this was in reference to the chlamydomonas algae. Yeah, right.
That's precisely the point which I made, that Kent, he isn't educated in regards of molecular biology, and if he were, then he would have been able to give the adequate answer to that argument. And the truth is that the transition from a unicellular to a multicellular organism, that there is a huge problem, and science doesn't have an explanation how that could have happened. And one of the major hurdles is this: you need two things and innovations at the same time. One is that cells, they stick together, they have cell adhesion molecules on the membrane, and there are several sorts of them. They had to be newly invented, and at the same time, cells, they communicate together. And there had also at the same time to evolve new communication channels, and that would have to be an innovation in parallel. And that is a big problem. I mean, there is no, and they also claim that the transition happened over 40 times separately. Right. And that is hard to digest.
I agree.
To believe.
Well, actually, if I could add something to that, and that's a good point, Crimson Air, because this clumping behavior that was observed, there's a good article from Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins where he points out that this ability is actually due to an adaptive response that arises due to the interaction with its environment. And to make it understandable for the audience, it would be like an army. You ever seen that movie 300 where like all the Spartans come together and they kind of like clump together, and they put all their shields, and the Persians, when they're shooting their arrows, they're able to withstand that attack, right? It's a defense mechanism essentially. And that's exactly what's being seen here with this clumping behavior. So it's a little bit different than a colony, because, for example, humans, we build colonies, we come together, we build a civilization. You got nurses here, doctors here, policemen here, and we work together as a community, and that's good. It's beneficial. It's almost necessary. But it would be like everybody coming together if they were getting attacked by an invader. And they just kind of clump together, like I said in my example with that movie 300. So that's all that's seeing, and it's evidence of adaptation via mechanisms that are already there. They're pre-existing. This ability, it's not novel. So I do believe exactly. You're right. Kent should have had a better response to that for sure.
That's a good point, Donnie. And another thing is that when we are talking about that transition, it is about cell differentiation. And how did that come to be? And in order for you to have cell differentiation, you need the gene regulatory network program, which is very complex. And how did that come to be? How did that orchestration start? And how did the organism know which cells had to become a liver cell? And what is the quantity to, in the end, have a liver? You need also to know how many times that the cell has to divide. And if you have 40 divisions rather than 39, then you have cancer. So there is also a cell counting program, which knows exactly the cell has to divide X times in order to have then in the end the right product, the right organ. So there is an entire new range of complexity which has to arise in parallel at the same time. And to explain that by evolution is simply not tenable.
Yeah, there's
here's the-
destruction of information and transcribing going on throughout this entire process. Donnie, if you don't mind me asking, because you've listened to a lot of these debates, what do they think they're accomplishing when they say a bunch of garbage clumped together? What does that mean exactly? So voila, I can become a squirrel now because some garbage in the water clumped together? What does this mean? I didn't get that.
Well, it's a good question. It's because, you know, this major hurdle, as Otangelo was beautifully expressing here, from a single cell to a multi-celled organism, because we know animals and plants are, you know, consist of highly complex systems of cells that are interlocking. And these interlocking cells form tissues, structures, and whole bodies, right? So the question is, how did you go from a single celled like organism to a multicellular creature? So they'll point to this example of clumping, this clumping behavior, which when analyzed, as Otangelo was also pointing out, we're just seeing adaptation via environment through mechanisms that are pre-existing, that are built into the system. We're not seeing any evidence of, you know, so what Snake was right, or these evolutionists are saying, is these are the beginning stages of how life first transitioned from unicellular to multicellular organisms. But when you actually look at it, as we're talking about here, that there's nothing like that being seen.
You know, if you see Donnie, like for example, Erica, she just focuses on the transition from apes to humans, right? But you never see her explaining, for example, how do you get a new limb? And I have here a list of 7 items which have to merge together. That is the muscular system, the skeletal system, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the circulatory system, the integumentary system, and the lymphatic system. You need all these 7 items to evolve together to have a new limb, like an arm or a foot or whatever. And how do you explain that through evolution? I mean, this is something which is very complex. And besides this, you need to have also the program of the development to start from the single cell to then to the adult organism, which then is made of trillions of cells. How did that transition of development occur? So you have several new things and innovations which have to happen and evolve at the same time.
Amen. Well said. Well
Hey,
said. They want to avoid it at all costs.
Real quick, I think James has a question.
Yeah, back to the algae thing. When it goes to a colony, isn't it still a colony of algae?
Well, what's interesting, yeah, and that's a good question. The reason why they look to this specific example rather than typically what they were using with what they were using in the past with debates were examples of colonies, and those obviously don't work for many reasons, right? Humans form colonies all the time. It doesn't mean that, you know, an entire colony of humans came together to be one human. No, it's ridiculous. But this example was interesting because they'll point out that, and I think there's a couple similar examples. This supposed algae seemed to there seemed to have been a permanent expression of this clustering, right? Where this population of algae, once exposed to the predator, they became permanently clustered, essentially. And so they're trying to say this is a step above a colony. They're saying it's a step towards multicellularity. But as we've pointed out, no. Okay, it's a little different than a colony, sure. But when you actually analyze what's going on, it's an adaptive response to the environment, to the predator that these populations of algae are being faced with.
This is one thing, Donnie, but Chlamydomonas, they are actually photosynthesizing organisms. And what does that mean? They have nitrogenase, which is an enzyme which fixes nitrogen, and they also do photosynthesis. Now, the thing is that nitrogenase is shut up when it is in contact with oxygen. So Chlamydomonas, they form two cells which have a protection, where in one cell there is photosynthesis and in the other cell there is nitrogenase. They are separated from each other. So when the one cell is not shut up by the other because of exposure to oxygen, but that there are also other mechanisms where the same colony doesn't separate, and they internally they make that separation and that protection. And this is all pre-programmed. It is not that there is a transition going on from one state to another, but they can, depending on what is needed in the environment, they can change either to differentiated cells where one is oxygen producing and the other is continuing with nitrogen fixation. And then others, they do the whole process in a single cell. And that is not something which has evolved. That is something which is the same for supposedly billions of years, because algae, they supposedly exist for billions of years and they have not changed. So that claim that because we observed that is the initiation of multicellularity, that is just bogus.
Hey, Donnie, are you still there? I was wanting to ask you about something. There was a comment that Kent made that I found pretty interesting in the debate. He said something to the effect of, you could even try to go into a science lab and try to create a life, and it's simply not going to happen with the properties and all this. But then I thought to myself, if hypothetically you could go into a lab, put something together, create a life, wouldn't that still mean that you required an intelligence, a mind, a consciousness to make the variables work to bring life into existence anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's a good point too. Yeah, I mean, if you could create life in a lab, a bunch of scientists come together and create life in a lab, then it proves that, it takes intelligence. Now, what the evolutionists will respond to, or abiogenesis researchers will say, all the scientists are doing, the abiogenesis researchers, is they are manipulating the lab setting, right, the environment, in a way that they would assume the early Earth was like. And then they remove their hands, they withdraw themselves, and then they see if life can form. So that's how they would respond. They would say they're not manipulating every stage. They're just manipulating an environment that they would say, maybe this is what the early Earth was like. Let's see if life can evolve somehow. So, they would say, no, it wasn't intelligence. But Otangelo is the expert at abiogenesis. Is that more or less right? That's kind of what they're doing, right, Otangelo?
Yes. The thing is, you need 4 specific building blocks in order to have a cell, right? And I always ask the same question, and of course atheists, they cannot answer. If you had about 500 different amino acids prebiotically extant, and life just uses 20 amino acids, how did that selection process occur? You need to join all these 20 amino acids to one specific building site, separate them from all those amino acids which are not used, and just start to scramble those which are used in life, because otherwise you have just a tohu wabohu of all kind of sorts of molecules, but you have no separation. And I think this is one of the big problems in origins. People, they are always talking about evolution, and then they mention natural selection as a mechanism which is in operation. But in abiogenesis, in the origin of life, there was no natural selection. And in regards of physics, where there is the same situation, there was also no natural selection. Like, in order to have atoms, you need the 4 fundamental forces just in the right force and in the right relationship together. How was that separated to have the right force if you have an infinite range of possible forces? And why are these forces not oscillating? They could be constantly oscillating, but they are stable. We have laws of physics, and the state of affairs is that all these things are stable. What secures these forces? And if you remove God as the actor, what is left? as the one which secures them and selects them. There is no selector. I think this is one of the big problems, which is not very often used by us as creationists, and which is very commonly overlooked.
Well, they'll never be able to create life because they're missing the key ingredient, which is the spirit of life. And if they can do the spirit of life, well, you pretty much prove the supernatural, and therefore you prove God.
And
on top of,
and if I could say this, it'll be really quick. Even if they had all the right materials, the right ingredients, components, even if they had that all, they still have to explain how to introduce functional information. Okay, because a book is more than just ink on paper. I can accidentally spill a bottle of ink on a piece of paper. It doesn't mean that we're going to get information out of it. It doesn't mean we're going to get a message or a story. Okay, so you can have all the right components, but without the information being introduced, you don't have life. So
there was an article in Scientific American, and they said you need basically three things together in order to start life. One is information, the second is basic building blocks, and the third is energy. You need them together. And if you don't have one of the three, you cannot start life. And of course, the question, how did you get ATP and ATP synthase in order to produce ATP? That is a big abiogenesis question mark, which is unanswered. There is no life form which doesn't use ATP synthase turbines to produce ATP.
Exactly. And on top of isolating those 20 particular amino acids, you also have to isolate only the left-handed.
There is a bunch of there is a long list of requirements, and in regards of RNA and DNA, it is the same problem. RNA is a complex molecule made of three parts, of the base, of the ribose, and the phosphate, and the base has a very specific isomeric configuration with specific atoms, and if it was not that configuration, you would not have the right forces, hydrogen forces, in order to have Watson-Crick base pairing. And if you don't have Watson-Crick base pairing, you don't have DNA, you don't have a genome, you don't have stable information storage.
Donnie, are you still there? Oh, sorry. Donnie, are you still there?
Yes.
I was wanting to ask you something because you've been, again, the reason why I go to you as well as Mr. Logical is because you both have been involved in an unbelievable amount of evolution debates. I don't know if you heard my question earlier, but has any atheist or non-believer evolutionist, as far as you've heard, come up with some explanation for sex drive, the reproduction system, compatibility over billions of years? Has anybody come up with something? Because I haven't heard anything yet.
They keep coming up with new models to account for sexual reproduction, and then they implode, and they act like those never existed, and they come up with a new one, and then the new one implodes, and because the more discovery they do, the more their models just completely get obliterated. I mean, we're now at the point where it is known. Okay, it is known that recombination can take place, sort of, if you take let me preface this with, you would think if it's all just chemicals, right, and there's no information component to this and no signals that are necessary and clear differentiation components inside of from the molecular structures that differentiate between, like, say, male and female, then theoretically you should be able to take two half genomes, right, the one half of the side, right, of the double helix, and of two males, and recombine them somehow, right? Like, that's all that's happening. It's just a chemical bond. The Watson-Crick base pairing takes place, and you should be able to have recombination and form a new organism if that's all you have to do, right? Well, they've tried this over and over and over and over again to do, like, male female recombination, and it terminates every time. Like, just does not work. It fails every single freaking time. And they've been trying to do this for, like, almost a century at this point. And one of the things they've discovered recently is that there's all sorts of epigenetic tags, like ridiculous amounts of them, that specifically delineate and male and female strands, right? And without those markers, new life is not forming. It's not happening. The embryo is not coming into existence, and it terminates every single time. So you have to, this goes back to the chicken and egg problem, right? If this is necessary in order for the male-female differentiation and recombination to take place, and we know this is necessary, but you haven't yet accounted for how all of these markers come into place because the male and females don't exist yet, right? So what's your explanation for this? Oh, well, all those markers must not have been there, right? Like what we observe being necessary, that's not how it was. Therefore, that's what happened, and then this is what happened after that to somehow account for this. Like they're not accounting for the bigger picture of all these things, and this sort of point that I'm making, this gets completely ignored in the conversations and the debates about it, like in the supposed explanations, even though the research has been coming in, a lot of it's coming in over the last decade, that shows this beyond doubt, and of the why they weren't being able to accomplish that point I was making. Because if that barrier wasn't in place, then these hypothetical ideas might work, right? But we do see the barriers in place. And anyway, this is one of many examples of why, like, yeah, you can make up a story of how this happened, but it does not fit with what we observe in real time.
Thank you for your response.
Yes, X is mentioned as the queen of problems of evolutionary biology, because the problem is really immense, and special for if you study it. Like, just for example, the maturation of a sperm, that is absolute flabbergasting high-tech technology. And the chromosomes, they are compacted and then protected, and there is a the eukaryotic DNA is wound up on a histone, and in the transition, that histone is removed, and then the DNA strand is compacted, and then when when the sperm goes inside to the egg of the female egg, then it becomes histones from the female. Okay, so you need the histones from the male, from the sperm, and you need also the histones from the female, and they work in a joint venture together. And if you don't have both at the same time, no deal. So they have to be created at the same time.
And to your point, Otangelo, I mean, there's this, like, that's just one of literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of examples of the point you're making, of the things that are necessary to be working in synchronicity in order to maintain homeostasis, right? Like, and if you don't have homeostasis, you don't have life, right?
Yes.
Let's forget even reproduction, forget evolution. Like, you have to have all these balancing acts going on and walking the razor's edge in order for homeostasis to exist, in order for life to exist. And we're like, it's magnificently controlled chaos.
You need to have right from the beginning a calcium concentration inside of the cell 10,000 times less concentrated than outside of the cell. And if you don't have that, then you cannot have internal cell signaling. And that has to be constantly, as you said, in a balance, in homeostasis. And in order to have that, you need the right channels, the ion channels which balance that. And you need that for life to start. And that is already a huge abiogenesis problem. How do you explain that?
Well, I think that's kind of the point. And, I know something that Crimson Air's been last couple months has gotten curious about and started to go down the rabbit holes in, is just like looking into the improbabilities of all this stuff. And I'll let you speak to it just like Crimson Air, but like for those of like people like me, Otangelo, and others who have gone down the rabbit hole, and when you just look at the improbabilities and all of the things that are recognized to be necessary, and it's like, and then when you have people like a Eugene Koonin, who's currently the NIH head of evolutionary biology, H index 224, as we speak. I looked him up the other day, who him and many others have done the math on just the improbability for the basic transcription factors to exist, being 1 in 10 to the 1018th power. And like, oh, well, obviously the multiverse must exist because there's not enough probabilistic resources available in the entire freaking universe, even granting 13.7 billion years to enable these improbabilities to be accounted for. And you're talking about like just not all of the things that are necessary for life to exist. We're talking about just the factors for the replication and of DNA. Like it's a whole nother it's like a whole nother level. And then we have people like Godless Engineer and other folks running around being like, well, you know, the probabilities of this all happening by chance are way more probabilistic that happened from a naturalistic process than an intelligent agent being necessary. But it's like, it's recognized that there's not enough probabilistic resources to account for this. So how are you relying on probability, like somehow accounting for this? Like, did this go over your head?
I was thinking about that, John, and I think I don't know if I mentioned that with you, that Borel's law states that it is 10 to the 50th power, but if you multiplicate the time of the entire history of the universe, 13.7 billion years, with the number of atoms in the universe, 10 to the 80th power of atoms, and the fastest possible interaction which can happen in an atom, which is 1 to minus 10 to the 43rd power, then you have a number 1 to 10 to the 139th power. That is the resource of the entire universe in its entire history. And if you have an event that has less chance to happen than in that number, then I wouldn't say that it is not possible to happen anymore. Theoretically, you could maybe shuffle just once and then hit the jackpot, even if the odds would be bigger than that. But I mean, I think this is a good threshold to say, if the odds are bigger than that, then at least then a designer is a better explanation. Someone with intelligence which had a goal, a purpose, and then brought forward the thing in question.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead, Crimsoner.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to just touch on the Chlamydomonas algae again, because this was something that weighed heavily on my faith last year. And so in case there happens to be any Christian audience listening to this that is struggling in their faith, dealing with evolution, I just want to kind of draw out what Otangelo was saying across the board, which is that the goose that lays the golden egg for evolution, the Darwinian model, is random mutation, where the occurrence of beneficial mutations accumulate to allow for an organism to advance in terms of functionality. Now, random mutation occurs when the genome, the digital information which codes for that particular organism, is modified in such a way that it has an opportunity to advance. Now, that occurs through chemical interaction, through radiations, cosmic rays, not from predation. You could sustain numerous physical injuries to your body, and so long as you survive, your genetic information will remain untouched from the physical harm that you endure. Now, when they attempt to leverage this the algae argument in an attempt to support their belief of the single-celled organism transitioning into multi-celled, first thing to note and to challenge them on is to provide an example of that same algae in which it had an opportunity to go from single-celled to colony from a stimulus other than predation. And I suspect they will not be able to give such an example. because in order for random mutation to account for that, in order for the concept to be coherent, that information would have had to have been accumulated into the genome post predation, meaning that the surviving offspring of the algae that had sustained the predator interaction, which caused it to transition into the multicellular colonized state of being, would then be able to carry on that modified genome containing the information on how to colonize, to form a colony in which the cells adopt a singular function and to work together as a collective rather than on an individual basis. And therein lies the problem, because the only example they can give is where once the colony has formed, they perpetuate in that colonized state rather than dissipate back into, as Snake was saying in the debate tonight, the colonization was so permanent that if you even disturb one of the cells, he said cut one loose, although I doubt they were able to be able to do that, because I can't imagine them using a microscopic knife and kind of doing a scalpel on. But anyway, he said that if you even disturb one of them, the entire colony dies, and therein lies a problem for them, because the information contained within the genome had to have pre-existed prior to the colonization, otherwise it wouldn't have been able to take place. And if it had happened prior to the colonization, then there would be no single-celled. They wouldn't exist in the single-celled form to begin with. Like Otangelo was saying, this information had to pre-exist. And so to top off what he was saying on that would be my challenge, which would be to provide an example in which the same algae or any algae can exhibit this type of function where the stimulus was not due to predation, but rather X-rays or something. So I just wanted to touch on that. And also, as John was saying, I've been looking into trying to look at the statistics against abiogenesis, and it's absolutely mind-boggling. Ultimately, in the way I see it, in order for Darwinism to be coherent, mathematics would have to be harmonized with biology, because there are many more harmful mutations that occur in relation to beneficial ones, where the best ratio is approximately 10,000 to 1, and that's the absolute best you get. So mutations will...
You might also look at the trajectory that you would have to go even to get to Chlamydomonas, which are absolutely fascinating. Algae.
Absolutely.
I mean, first you would have to suppose a first or a last universal common ancestor. Then you would have to go to a eukaryotic cell, which is absolutely a blank field. Science has no explanation how that transition could have occurred. And then from there, you would have had to go to Chlamydomonas. And Chlamydomonas is an organism which has a flagellum. It has an eye spot. And the eye spot and the flagellum, they work together. They are connected together. And the eye spot is also claimed to be the simplest eye, but it is also extraordinarily complex. It has over 700 proteins. And then the question is, how did vision evolve? And eye spot, as being the simplest eye, has also rhodopsin, which is the main player, which captures photons, and it is made of two parts. One is opsin and one is retinal, and they are synthesized separately, and then they have to interact. They have to be the retinol has to be inserted in the pocket of the protein, and then it is like a switch, which then will activate the signal transduction pathway, which then will transmit the signal to the flagella, which then will either promote that that the algae will distance itself from the sunlight, or it will go closer to sunlight depending on its needs. But there are several interconnected and interdependent systems. It starts with the protein itself, which is irreducible. You have two players which have to merge together. Then you need to connect them with the flagella. The flagella is a well-known example of irreducible complexity with 36 proteins. If you remove one of those, then you have no function. Then you need the interconnection of the eye spot with the flagella, and that is also an irreducible system. If you don't have the three players, then the algae cannot react to the sunlight. So you see basically irreducible complexity in all that range. And that is a big problem for evolution.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just like you pointed out, it's the element of interdependency throughout the organism and throughout the genome that must be accounted for in order for evolution to be coherent in the slightest. And that's where they shoot themselves in the foot when they attribute evolutionary advance to random mutations, because the mutations can't be random. They have to be targeted. And if they're targeted, then that points to intelligence. And they can't have that, so they keep defaulting back to random mutation.
Well, and you're totally right. And what drives me up the wall about all this is the arguments want to be made in relation to, and I'm not in any way, shape, form, or fashion saying that the points that Otangelo was just making about like all the different parts have to work together and such doesn't have relevance, isn't important. It is, because that's the physical representation of the information necessity. Right? You have to have, in order for these parts to exist, you have to have the preceding information that results in a three-dimensional object. And like the reason, this is why in the modern era of technology in which we live, the fact that this goes over so many people's heads just drives me up the wall, especially when the people that dismiss this are supposedly the highly educated, highly intelligent ones, right? There is nobody who is rational who would ever come to the conclusion that a 3D print script to create a three-dimensional object, which is the shape of the different parts that make up the bacterial flagellum, right, would ever be able to produce themselves. Yet, the different genetic code sequences that are necessary for those three-dimensional objects in like to make up all the different proteins which make up the bacterial flagellum, right? It's the direct equivalent. It's 3D print scripts. Nobody would ever, they're like, oh, well, the parts could have been used for something else and could have adapted. Right, cool, that's great. I could do the exact same thing if I already had the preceding G-code files for the three-dimensional print of the 3D print script for these different parts that are going to be made out of freaking plastic or whatever, right? Like, you're okay, fine. What's your point? They could be used for something else. Great, that's fantastic. You still have to have the preceding three-dimensional print, 3D print script. Idiots! Like, this is unavoidable. This is an unavoidable reality. So, at the ultimate root of all of this is from the evolutionary abiogenesis and evolutionary perspective, is that somehow three-dimensional print scripts can create themselves. That is what this boils down to. There is no way around this. It is an unavoidable barrier to the plausibility of no preceding intelligent agent being necessary for our existence. It is unavoidable, except that the vast majority of these individuals we interact with, they want to avoid it and act like they don't have to account for it. And
I think that's beautifully said, John. And I think you have touched to the core of the intelligent design argument. I think this is the strongest ID argument, and I'll quote here because I think this is beautiful. Cells have a codified description of themselves in digital form stored in genes, and have the machinery to transform that blueprint through information transfer into an identical representation in analog 3D form, the physical reality of that description. Using Bayesian probability or abductive reasoning, an intelligent cause is the best explanation.
Mr. Grasso and Logical, can I ask you about something since we're getting into this?
Yeah, sure.
Have you guys heard the DMT argument yet?
I have not.
Well, the concept is that whenever the body goes through some kind of physical trauma, usually fatal, wounded to the point where there's no getting out of it, the body releases all these chemicals that cause a euphoric effect for the person who's damaged. Now, the question I have to ask on this, how would evolution, if it's not a conscious entity, doesn't care about how we suffer pain? This is the reason I asked about pain receptors. How did evolution set it up to where this stuff releases to bring bliss or almost make you kind of high just as you're about to die, as if it's stunting your pain so you can go? It seems like only something that's merciful would design something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a pain is transmitted through notch receptors, and it is all based on signaling networks. And of course, if you don't have and feel pain, then it is a high risk that you injure yourself, you don't perceive it, and then you die. And that is one of the things which have to be created. They cannot be the product of slow evolutionary processes.
Why I haven't heard a good explanation in the first place why something like the DMT would even exist in the first place, and why does it seem to activate just as a person is about to go through a traumatic and most likely death, fatality? How would evolution be able to predict this in any kind of way to create such a system? It seems like it makes more sense if you were to say a loving God or a conscious mind designed it so death wouldn't have such a sharp edge to it, that you could go almost as if you're high going into the afterlife, if that makes sense.
Well, all I'm going to say is I don't think you can utilize natural selection as the way to account for that being the ideal. Like, how do you know? Like, if only the people that are experiencing this are the ones that are dying, there's no way for the male or female to, like, from a reproductive perspective, be like, oh, I want to mate with the organisms that have bliss at the end of their life. How the hell would you know that? Like, that's not even a remotely plausible thing that could be even taken into account, right? How do you know if the person had the bliss in terms of who you mated with? Like, come on, it's just ridiculous. I agree. I agree. I 100% agree with what you're saying, Brett. I'm just saying, like, the ridiculousness. Like, let's do some reductio ad absurdum here of how do you account for these sorts of concepts that we're talking about here. Like, it's just not even plausible. It's the same thing with, and I'm going to share this real quick, things like something for the audience, anybody who watches this. I strongly recommend, when you learn about different concepts of biological systems and components and such, go on YouTube and type in whatever the name is, and then follow it up with the word animation. And then you will be able to visualize, in many cases, not even the true intricacies that are necessary, but you can visualize conceptually in a visual sense, right, of what's actually happening inside of biological systems. And if you look at this and you realize what is required for you to exist, and then really contemplate, like, is the premise of this creating itself actually plausible, will become an extraordinary, to say that it is plausible to create itself will become more and more difficult the more and more you actually take the time to see what is actually going on and what is actually necessary. So what I'm about to play right here is showing like the voltage gates of I think these are going to be potassium ion channels, maybe, I don't know, let's see. But these are voltage gate channels and action potential, right? And this stuff is freaking nuts, what's going on. And it's like a fundamental for your very existence.
Well, action potentials in neurons, they depend on 4 channels, and you need all 4 channels. And if one is missing, you cannot create an action potential, and you
Absolutely.
cannot have neurons, and you cannot have force generation. That is a big problem. There you have again irreducible complexity.
Right. Well, and folks, what you're about to see, these are voltage gated channels. Think about that. Voltage gate. You'll see this, but I think in this one you'll see this. But voltage gate means it's checking for charge, and then opening and closing based on the volts. Like this is what we have in our computer systems, folks. Like this is crazy.
Is at its resting membrane potential. The activation gates of the voltage-gated sodium ion channels are closed, and the inactivation gates are open. Voltage-gated potassium ion channels are closed. Depolarization is initiated by a stimulus which makes the membrane potential more positive, causing the voltage-gated sodium ion channels to start to open. As threshold is reached, many sodium channels open. Sodium ions diffuse across the membrane, causing depolarization. Voltage-gated potassium ion channels also begin to open, but more slowly. Therefore, depolarization occurs because more sodium ions diffuse into the cell than potassium ions diffuse out of it. As the membrane potential approaches maximum depolarization, the inactivation gates of the voltage-gated sodium ion channels begin to close, and the diffusion of sodium ions decreases. The potassium ion channels remain open, and potassium ions continue to diffuse out of the cell. The increased potassium ion permeability lasts slightly longer than the time required to bring the membrane potential back to its resting level. The extra efflux of potassium ions causes the membrane potential to become slightly more negative than the resting value. After the voltage-gated potassium ion channels close, the active transport of sodium and potassium ions reestablishes the resting membrane potential.
Oof, that is rough, man. That is damn rough.
Well, and what's even crazier is remember I mentioned there's like other stuff going on that isn't visualized there. There's other stuff like there's like reserve pouches so that like if the voltage polarization isn't being reached because there's like a shortage of one or the other, there's like reserves with pumps that like, oh, the polarization isn't being regained. I guess we're short on, whichever one you're short on, right? And your little reserve pouch that they're all over the place, right? All your cells shoots out the appropriate components that are necessary in order to regain the optimal charge. Like, huh? Like this is like crazy engineering, like insane engineering, right? And one of the things that wasn't mentioned in this, but like those channels are optimized in the extreme in relation to physics, right? Like it's impossible for them to be more optimized than they are. Like you can't make them better in relation to physics. It's like it's mind-blowing stuff, right? And then this goes back to my earlier point about like that is a physical manifestation of the information that is necessary in order to create those three-dimensional objects. And we're being told that the information to create three-dimensional object, which is optimized in the extreme to be able to do what we just saw, right? That information created itself. That's what we're being told. That's what is being argued by the evolutionary biology camp. That is what their claim ultimately is at the root of their claims. And then they say that, oh, it could have just happened very slowly over long periods of time. Well, it's recognized, and there's all sorts of disorders where, that the point that was made in the video about like this one takes slightly longer than the other one in order to like balance everything out, and this one's closed, open slightly after, and that like stuff in order to be fixed. Well, guess what, folks? All sorts of diseases are caused, and conditions are caused by those things not being perfectly timed. So if they're not perfectly timed, that means you're not the fittest. Therefore, if evolution is the survival of the fittest through natural selection, all those different talking points, then how is that plausible? the plausibility implodes. And I'm using that as that's just one of a bazillion examples of this, right? And yet we're told that, well, yes, now it is optimized. Yes, now it is like that, but it hasn't always been like that. It hasn't always had to be like that. It could not. It's like, which one of us is not actually being, analyzing this from a plausibility perspective?
I just keep hearing them use the same arguments. They bring nothing new to the table, and they don't seem to actually do any research or look into what it is that you, as well as Donnie and Kent, have suggested over and over and over again. I don't know. If you don't mind me asking, in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned a debate with Godless Engineer. Were you talking about the past one where you just rocked him, or are you getting ready to do a new one?
Oh no, I don't think he'll ever debate me ever again. I'm doing a Flashback Friday where I'm taking some clips from what led up to our debate, and then something from the debate itself, and I'm just editing it together just for some entertainment.
That was a rough debate, man. You look like a deer in headlights. It's just like, wow, man, just totally out of his league on that. Yikes.
Well, what's funny is, in one of the little segments I'm taking out from the videos that he made about me leading up to that debate, was him talking trash about how I didn't know what I'm talking about. He wasn't worried about me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I gave him the opportunity to retract his positions and his attacks on me. And he talked a bunch of trash, and, there's not a chance I'm retracting all this kind of stuff. And you think you don't know what you're talking about, so on and so forth. So that's part of the reason in my opening statement of our debate, I explained why I was going to destroy him. It's because he had, come after me and said I was, this idiot and didn't know anything. It's like, okay, fine. The gloves are off. There is no quarter shall be given. And I went into it with the express intent of utterly obliterating him.
That's definitely what the outcome seemed to be. Very good.
Well, it's like I said, man, like there's so much just cajoling, and, there's so many people on our side that, oh, you just need to be super duper nice. And it's like, well, there's a difference between being vitriol, using unjustified vitriol, or not refusing to point out how ridiculous some of these positions are. Like, I'm sorry, if pointing out how somebody who is adamantly arguing and convincing other people of something that is ridiculous, and you're convincing other people that it's true, how am I the one in the wrong position to be pointing out how ridiculous their position is? Like, if people want to say that it is, so be it. Don't watch or don't engage with me. That's fine. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna do everything in my power to relay to folks that some of this stuff is just nuts.
Oof, goodness gracious. Yeah. I don't know if you knew this, Logical, but a while back on the now just completely and utterly dead podcast Non Sequitur, I was invited to take on Steve McCree, Godless Engineer, as well as the former Kyle Curtis who robbed the place. I don't know if you heard about that, but I'm
aware of all that. That was quite the dumpster fire for sure.
So I got in there and I did some questions at Godless Engineer, and I don't know if you got to see that whole thing, but it got to the point where he got so PO'd at me that his wife at the time jumped on the mic and started yelling at me. Did you have that happen to you?
Not during the stream, but on Twitter after the fact. Yes, I did. His wife came after me. It was pretty funny. And so Godless Engineer lives about 100 miles south of me, right? And on Twitter, when they were still talking trash about me, right, I offered, and claiming I didn't understand information theory and all that kind of stuff, I offered to drive down to where they are. We would go to the university where he got his degree and go I'll set up a meeting with professors at your alma mater that are experts in information and communication theory, and we can sit down. You can put forth your position. I'll put forth my position, and we'll see which one of us, and we'll let third parties at your alma mater. Let's let them decide which one of us has a correct interpretation of all this, right? And his wife, I kid you not, his wife said that that was a threat. That I was threatening them with like they should be scared and be like fearful because I offered to come down and meet them in a neutral location on a public university in the presence of professors to have a conversation. She was viewing that as a physical threat. And I'm just like, right, that you're off your rocker. And this is like, we're living in the era of like just make blanket accusations and think that somehow is actual reality. Like it's like, what are you gonna do? Like press charge? You gonna call the police? Like I would love to go to court on that one. Like, yes, Your Honor. I asked to set up a time to meet him with multiple witnesses in a public place to discuss an intellectual concept. It's actually two of them: information and communication theory and their relevance to biology. Like, yes, Your Honor. That was my intent. I mean, look. Anyway, I got some great entertainment out of that one.
Oof, goodness gracious! What's some of the future ideas you got?
Well, I got a few professors I'm working on. I'm trying to get on to have discussions with, and then currently writing a short book on what is code and why is the genetic code a code. And I'm doing it in a very structured way, just to basically give the atheists on YouTube no further excuse to be ignorant of the basics of communication theory. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous at this point, especially given the fact that there's hardcore scientists who have done streams specifically for atheists to stop being idiots and can continue to issue the same talking points. It's really quite fascinating. And then one of the things I'm working on is actually I was doing my poll. You see what how the results are coming out right now. I'm looking, not the weather's getting better. I'm looking at doing some live on the street stuff here where I live because it's got a huge tourist market. Let's see. Right now, it's a tie right now between evolution or creation and how do we exist, ID or chance. Okay. Yeah, but third option, God does not exist because question is not far behind. Okay, interesting.
You got a poll going on? Where's this at?
It's in the chat.
All right. So nobody's given a good reason. I've never heard a scientific argument for why a God isn't compatible with the universe yet. It's mostly emotional arguments and nonsense. Even if these clowns could prove some kind of form of evolution, it still wouldn't take a designer out of the picture. So have you heard a good scientific argument? Because I sure haven't. No.
I mean, their arguments usually boil down to, I don't see evidence, therefore God does not exist. And God is not required. And it's like, so you don't have evidence against or for from your position, but you've reached a conclusion that means that God does not exist. Interesting. I'm pretty sure that's called the argument from ignorance fallacy.
It seems like a lot of the folks are sticking with the evolution topic. How does have you heard the non-believers any kind of explanation for the fact that the Big Bang is almost by definition considered supernatural?
Well, of course, they claim that it's not. They claim that, they cling to the unprovable, like multiverse models, or the cyclical universe that opens and closes and all that kind of stuff, the big bangs and the big crunches. I mean, they claim all those things, but what I find so fascinating about those models or those hypotheses of explanation, the people that come up with them concede that they're not testable nor provable. Therefore, they require faith, right? Ultimately, yet they claim that anybody who believes in God is blinded by faith. It's like, so per the admission of the people that come up with this stuff, you can't actually prove this. So therefore, by definition, that means you're having to take it on faith. Okay. How does that make our positions any different then? If you're going to claim that there's no evidence for God, well, you don't actually have any way to prove your position either. Therefore, you have no evidence for your position.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't heard any good scientific. I just hear emotional arguments. And I mean, there's plenty of things. There's literally trillions of things that allegedly are existing right before our eyes and in the universe we can't see without certain technology and tools. The argument is, well, I can't see, therefore something doesn't exist. That's not very good scientific thinking. There's not a lot of critical thought in that explanation they give.
Well, Mega Beaver was earlier tonight was basically using the religion. I don't see any, the religion's getting in the way. Religious claims don't prove anything. Therefore, it's like, well, I don't think God exists, right? It's like this is where the whole differentiation between and like where are you going to start on the arguments. That's why I'm so adamantly in favor of forcing the global atheism argument to be defended versus the local atheist positions to be defended, right? First, because so you won't even consider whether or not your existence requires a God, a preceding entity, but you want to hyper focus on why this one doesn't exist, right? I.e., the Christian God, Allah, whatever, right? Zeus. Like you're going to hyper focus on that versus looking at the big picture necessities in terms of is there a preceding agent necessary? And if you're not even going to go look at the big picture, then why should I take you seriously? Like you're obviously not actually wanting to have a full scale analysis of the position. Well, and not all, but many of them simultaneously claim that just because I came to an ultimate conclusion in relation to which God is true, they want to act like I didn't first consider whether one was necessary and then derive which one I think is the correct one from that. And you get all the, oh, you're just brainwashed and you got cognitive bias and blinded by faith and all these different things. It's like, actually, that's not what I did. So you can use that as an excuse for yourself, but that's not actually reality for me.
Does anybody, whenever they're... Oh, go ahead, Crimson. Sorry.
Yeah, and just to touch on what John was saying, that it is exactly faith that they hold to, but the difference between their faith and our faith is that theirs is irrational because it doesn't comport to the reality which we observe. To negate the element of intelligence being responsible for our existence, which we now know to be the case because of the advancement in genetics, modern science, and biology. To negate the element of intelligence is to conflate intelligent pattern with chaotic pattern. And a great example would be Mount Rushmore. There's no possible way you can get those sculptures of the four presidents' faces on the side of a mountain from random erosion due to wind and rain or any other force that exists in nature. But if you believe that that's what took place, then you hold it by faith. And that faith is irrational because the forces which you ascribe to being responsible for creating Mount Rushmore is not observed to do the same thing today. Now, of course, we know that Mount Rushmore was created by man, and that's the point of the point of the argument is that you have order, you have patterns which can only arise from an intelligent mind, and then you have random chaos. And the information contained in genetics can only come about through an intelligent mind. And so whenever if there are any Christians listening who are kind of layman's in their level of familiarity with evolution, whenever they are encountered, whenever you encounter an evolutionist, like recently on Clubhouse, I had come in contact with somebody named T, who I know is familiar with you, John, because he made reference to knowledge of your channel, and he expressed certain. He wasn't very specific, and I can't. I don't want to even try to represent what he was trying to say, but from a general standpoint, he expressed dissatisfaction in certain areas of biology, which he felt that you didn't answer to his satisfaction. So I encouraged him to come here and to ask, present his challenge himself, and apparently he has no inclination to do so. Now, when I had spoken to him, he had tried to push the idea of evolution on me through the argument of ERVs, endogenous retroviruses, and the absurdity of his position was exposed when he claimed that ERVs were confirmed to have been a result of common descent because they were found in fossilized organisms. To which I immediately responded by saying, do you mean to say that they found fossilized remains of ERVs? And he said, he doubled down on it. He said, yeah, they were found in the extinct fossilized creatures in strata. So that's how we know that we had that it wasn't through special creation, but rather through inheritance that we had gotten them from earlier organisms. So then I simply asked him, well, how did they test for any viral elements in mineralized specimens? And he said, well, no, they weren't mineralized. They were still testable remains. And to which the last thing I asked was, well, if a dead remains of an organism isn't mineralized, then in what form would it be considered a fossil? So essentially, he had no understanding of what he was saying. He made himself look like a clown. It was just, I was fortunate enough to have encountered an atheist of that caliber, to which I was able to immediately identify his bullcrap.
Well, what's amazing about the point you're bringing up there is when it comes to phylogenetics, right, and all the trees and all this kind of stuff, people don't seem to. I think the vast majority of people are unaware of the reality that 99.99999% of the genomes that are being sequenced, which are being used to, postulate the family trees, right, are being done on organisms that are extant. Like you think about this, folks. We didn't even know how to do genetic testing and sequencing until 30 years ago or so, and it was like little piecemeal stuff. I mean, this week, ladies and gentlemen, we actually completed the sequencing of the human genome. Okay, we were told ad nauseum that it happened in 2004, right? Actually, they had not done the entire thing, the entire human genome. We just finished it up, and papers were published on it this week. I know because I read them. And there's all these things in different regions that they're repeat sections, all this kind of stuff. They didn't go and actually sequence them. So we just now in 2022 finished the entire sequencing of the human genome. And yet we have individuals who claim dogmatically that because we're doing genome sequencing in comparison of things that are alive right now, we are able to 100% derive the evolutionary trees of all these organisms that are dead. in their relation to things that are alive now. Like, think about that, folks. There is inference out the freaking wazoo about the relationships. And earlier, by the way, something I was thinking about when you guys were talking about like bacteria and such is the vast majority of quote unquote adaptation of bacteria is through horizontal gene transfer, ladies and gentlemen. Horizontal gene transfer. What does that mean? That means that the plasmids and other things that are being used to transfer gene sequences that are in bacteria number 1 over into bacteria number 2 to be able to account for, pressure, whatever the environmental factor is, right? It is incorporating something that existed already into its genome. Now, this bacteria number 2 didn't have this function in its genome, but bacteria number 1 did, and was able to make a copy of it and send it over to bacteria number 2 to now have the same defense mechanism that bacteria number 1 had. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? That means that the component that's being transferred for the adaptation to take place existed prior to the need for the adaptation that had to take place. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So to me, if you think that through, it's like, and they're realizing there's like this mega genome in bacteria they're having to, and prokaryotes are having to like start to try and quantify and document as they're seeing all this stuff. So okay, so let's think about this. Let's say there is this massive, like this overarching mega genome, right, for bacteria. Well, that means that there was a gigantic one originally, and perhaps it was spread over and not every type of bacteria had it, or perhaps a bacteria originally had the mega genome, and then it's been dispersed throughout different species, over the years, right? There's so many different factors that come into play on this. But again, it brings you back to a massive issue, which is, so if per our models, there's all this evolutionary history to get to the point where these things happen, but then per our inferences, a lot of these sequences, these capabilities existed basically from the beginning or from very, very early on in the evolutionary timeline. So you actually had more data overarching across the entirety of the bacteria, right, than each individual one has, but you had to have it prior to. That's a massive problem for the concept of evolution, it being remotely plausible. And the amount of data you're talking about having to account for is just so astronomical. We're not even being able to quantify, we don't have it yet. We don't have all the data yet, but we're being told this is how it all came. All the data we don't know, we don't currently know we have to account for yet. We know how all the account it came to be, even though we have not yet accounted for the data that has to be accounted for. I mean, to me, when you really think about that, it's like, wait a minute. It sounds to me like you're trying to sell me the bridge to nowhere. And maybe you've been conned. Like you're trying to sell me the bridge to nowhere, but you really think there is a bridge to nowhere. And now when people like us are coming along being like, bro, you're trying to sell me a bridge to nowhere. No. It goes somewhere. No, dude, it goes to nowhere. And when people are so brainwashed, they don't even want to contemplate the very baseline points that we're talking about.
Right. And on the topic of ERVs, in the debate tonight, it was briefly mentioned, but Kent neither really addressed it fully. So Snake didn't really push hard on that. But Kent said that he would do an episode on that. And so in case there's anyone listening now who's not familiar, the issue of the point of contention is how do we account for the number of identical insertion points of a few of the many thousands of these retroviruses within the human genome compared to, say, the chimpanzee. And I mean, it's still an ongoing research and there are conflicting reports, but the most that I've seen reported was that there are about 14 out of at minimum 30 plus thousand human endogenous retroviral elements that are found in the same locations along the genome as compared to chimps. So they say, well, we have them in the same location because of common descent. Well, then if that's the case, then wouldn't it make a stronger argument for there to be more than just a handful of these viruses out of the many tens of thousands that are found in the same insertion point along the genome? So what's the explanation then? Well, under the intelligent design model, you have the variable of insertion bias, which they've termed insertion bias via site preference, as determined by the likelihood of an ERV to express its regulatory elements in relation to the host immunal activity. So there are actually more, there are spots along the genome that are more prone to being inhabited by where the ERV is inserted as opposed to others. So when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, obviously you're going to find some that are inserted in exactly the same spot in the genome between humans and chimps and non-hominids and so on and so forth, because there are so many more retroviruses that are not found in the same location as compared to the ones that are. So again, for those, for the Christians who engage with atheists pushing evolution, I would suggest for you to push in questioning when they say there's no God because we got here through evolution. Well, first, that's an inference. But that aside, ask them, how did evolution bring about life? And then they'll go to one way or another, they'll identify mutation as being the instrument of creation. And for them, that is a dead-on arrival argument to make, because when they use mutation, then you have to ask them to identify how a mutation is able to generate the creation of new organisms. In other words, to create new functional complexity within the digital information of genetics. And so they would have to have beneficial mutations, more beneficial mutations over harmful mutations. And so because mutations will tend to drive a species to extinction before it has a chance to advance, that's where it falls apart for them. The only advantage evolution would have a play in terms of evolution being a viable mechanism for creation is where you have a population exceeding 1 quadrillion, a body size less than 1 square centimeter, and a generation period of less than 3 months, which means that evolution would be marginally viable for viruses and bacteria, where they would advance up to a certain point. In other words, to accumulate in beneficial mutations up to a certain point before the deleterious ones drive the virus or bacteria back to the point of extinction. And this is verified in the real world, where speciation is only seen in examples that match the mathematical limits, and all the outliers fall into the extinction curve. And so all of this means that evolution has no explanatory power for addressing the presence of all large mammals, including humans, let alone the problem of the initial advancement of abiogenesis. And one area where a good illustration of this is where, because they predicted the rate of evolution to be slow, they had expected to find the appearance of new organisms within the fossil, what they call the fossil record, in the rock strata, They expected to find the appearance of new organisms in a steady, consistent rate, but then the Cambrian explosion overturned that prediction. And so, to address this problem on demand, which is to say ad hoc, they just invented something to address this problem. They came up with the model of punctuated equilibrium, which was a proposed period of existence within Earth's history in which there was a high level of radiation that resulted in rapid speciation, but this fails to account for the fact that this is when they use punctuated equilibrium to try to explain the Cambrian explosion, they shoot themselves in their other foot, because we already know that the beneficial mutations are so far outnumbered by the deleterious ones. Now that to multiply that to an exponential to an exponential level would be to have so many more deleterious mutations where you simply drown out any possibility for evolutionary advance. So you have this period of high radiation that's supposedly driving force for evolution, when we observe in nature to only have the capacity to do the exact opposite.
Yeah,
so
it gets ridiculous when you look into the. That's why I always use the word plausible, right?
Right.
This stuff just breaks down when you actually begin to look at the necessities, not from if this happened and this happened and this happened, then this can happen. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, anybody can come up with that. It's like, I have a brain, I can come up with a hypothetical of how anything can occur, and it doesn't mean that the way I come up with it is actually plausible. What's up, Jamie?
Hey, man. I put a clip in the private chat on the phone here because I can't share it, but it illustrates the point Crimson was making there about what they were appealing to.
All right, hang on one second. Here, let me share this real quick. Yeah, this stuff, it just gets ridiculous.
It's short.
Yeah, I got it. I'm pulling it up.
Yeah, so they propose high radiation that results in rapid speciation, but it lacks the explanatory power in addressing the necessary plentiful emergence of beneficial mutations for natural selection to operate under the framework of evolutionary advancement. And this is where Gould and Eldridge desperately tried to make evolution work, where the mathematical indication is that it's at its lowest possible probability, because when the species population drops to a few thousand, there's practically zero probability of evolutionary advance.
This illustrates the problem of that idea.
Yeah, when we look in the fossil record,
I'm going to play this real quick. And real quick, folks,
Okay.
some of the stuff that we're talking about right now, in my interview with Dr. Seigart, we kind of got into his research in a paper he published recently is directly relevant to what's being discussed right now in terms of how this all works, where the lines are drawn mathematically, basically, of like, oh wait, if you're here, then you're KO'd. Here's what's necessary. And it gets very, very it's very interesting. Let's play this real quick.
That's it. We have to fight fire with fire. If nuclear refuse gave them superpowers, it could do the same for me. Citizens, I'm off to the toxic waste dump.
Mayor West, you have lymphoma.
Oh, my.
Probably from rolling around in that toxic waste.
I see.
What in God's name were you trying to prove?
I was trying to gain superpowers.
Well, that's just silly.
Silly, yes. Idiotic, yes.
Yeah, it gets bad. It's But on that note, guys, we're coming up right on 3 hours, and it's 12:20 my time. I am about to go to bed. So, Jamie, I know you hopped in your last second. Anything you hopped in early to really get to talk? Anything?
I just want to say I get to be Wolverine.
Okay. All right. You got any last words before we wrap up?
God bless you.
All right. Mark,
I'll just say when they look to the fossil record, the areas where they find the most so-called transitional species primarily includes whales and horses, whose population levels are so low, generation time so long, and body size so large that their probability for evolutionary advance is even lower than that of humans. So anyone in the audience, if you're tackling evolution, atheists who push evolution, just really probe their arguments to the extent where they expose their own irrationality in attributing for the occurrence of something to that which we observe in nature, to do the exact opposite, which is to drive a species towards extinction rather than increase the genetic information. Challenge them to give examples of beneficial mutations. And so on that note, I'll just say thanks for having me, and I look forward to chatting with you guys again in the future.
See you, buddy. Hey, John, I did remember one thing I just wanted to ask you about, but we can talk about it later, but I'll just throw it at you.
Good.
And I may be just thinking this may be bad thinking or whatever. I haven't thought about it too much, but is the idea that human beings have an essence that defines who they are, like before you're born. Does that pose a problem for anything irreducibly complex in the human biology in the physical sense? If you appeal to,
I wouldn't say so, especially if you're looking at it from a dualistic perspective, and the body is the mechanism for the expression of the mind in the physical realm. I mean,
yeah, that's true. It only really is irreducibly complex in the sense of how it functions in the system, the physical world. So I guess that's kind of pointless.
It's not pointless, but I mean, I think that can be accounted for. That's all I'm saying. All right, folks.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I'm about to post a link in the side checks. It looks like Donnie is premiering a video from my last after show. So if you want to bounce on over to Standing for Truth, here's a link for what's going on over there, and it will look very similar. It'll look very similar, but there's a link for that. But
can I say something real quick to Donnie? Those of you who I have given support to in the past, who I stopped supporting everybody for financial reasons, expect to see me in your support section again.
Oh, I appreciate that, Jamie. Yes, I saw you rejoin the membership of my channel. So thank you very much for that, Jamie. Is everything? I know you got a new job and stuff. Everything good to go for you again?
Yeah. I just didn't have like a bank account where I moved to, and like I've just been working so much and taking care of things I needed to for the new property and stuff that I just hadn't gotten around to actually banking. Putting my money in the bank. So I just didn't have. I have the finances to keep supporting. I just didn't have the ability, but now I've finally had a chance to do that.
That annoying digital or electronic transfer mechanisms are obnoxiously necessary these days. That's for sure.
There's no Banner Bank where we moved to, so that was the problem for me.
Right.
Just real quick, I just wanted to mention that for anyone who might not have been aware, mail-in President Biden had issued the executive order to investigate on how to create a viable digital currency. Yeah, the day's coming quick.
Oh yeah, I mean that's been going on. There was the World Government Forum in Dubai last week, and the digital currency. I mean, okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is the reality. There's 186 recognized countries on the planet. Just over 100 of them, their central banks are actively moving towards digital currency. Like this is reality. And if you think this is fantasy or not actual reality, then you're ignorant, because that is what's going on. But anyway, okay, I'm going to sleep. And Snake, I see you backstage, man. But we're wrapping up here, and Donnie has left. He's over on his channel. Folks, as you contemplate all of the things that have been discussed tonight in the debate in the after show, as you are considering the necessities for your existence, make sure that whatever conclusion you reach is one that is logical, plausible, and probable. Have a good night, y'all.